listening to Reset Race. You now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. What? Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake. Lineage go back to U.S. Southern plantations. Lineage, Jim Crow and mass incarceration. Redlining lynchings. We are old from this nation. You're not about justice if you ain't for reparations. MG the wise one. Cousin mother intellectual. Samantha bringing fire. Anti-black we pressing you. No permanent friends and no permanent enemies. The backbone of the country. To win you need our energy. You gon' see. Listening to Reset Race. You now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake.
Until you do right by me, everything you think about is gonna crumble.
As I said, welcome. I'm Michael Rand from Act Up Fight Press. I never remember before I say that.
I'm Doc Stodden. I am a political scientist.
So I'm gonna keep it short. So it is Samantha Angelique.
Yeah, what's up, everybody? This is John C. Back with the fam, average American Negro.
Yeah, they call me Mud.
Welcome back to Reset Race. This is an after show sort of show. What do we say, Sam? Shit, I forgot that.
Yeah, after show.
After show with Doc here. We're going to talk about socialism. We're going to talk about real socialism because apparently the American brands of socialism are anti-reparations, obviously. So so we're going to talk with Doc about real socialism and his view. And let's run it down. I'll let Sam and Doc run it from here. All right, let's go.
I'm just going to start off by asking a question. I'm going to let Doc and John go because this will be good but okay. So John, we always have this conversation because the socialists are always talking, or the so-called socialists, right? Yeah. The so-called socialists.
Quotes, yeah,
in quotes. I got my quotes up. The so-called socialists are like, oh, we want everything to be better, but they still want to like own a company and still like be a boss. So how does that work in socialism? Is that socialism or is that something else?
Well, it's democratic socialism. It's that's what they talk. It's democratic socialism. Like they just want a more equitable workplace. You know what I mean? Where workers get treated more fairly and got more of a say. But it's still a hierarchy. It's still a boss. You still gotta go work for your boss. You get paid decently, better than when you was getting paid before. You get treated better, but it's still a hierarchy. And somebody's at the top still controlling shit like. So it's not like, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that our society is fucking it's crazy because it's like even socialism, as you talk about socialism, how the workers controlling the means of production. I mean, yeah, but like, what if a worker don't really know how to fucking, you know what I mean, grow the like? I don't like the thing about it when it comes to like the particular socialism that lefties talk about here in America is more based off of just workers being treated more fairly and people. You know what I mean? Which I feel like it's more reasonable. To be honest with you, like if anything, I would be considered if you really broke if I wasn't advocating for reparations. If we had reparations, then I probably would be something similar to a democratic socialist. But I don't consider myself a socialist or a democratic socialist because we ain't got no fucking wealthy at the bottom. So I consider myself. I'm part of the black wing. I ain't part of the left wing or the right wing. Whatever wing is gonna get us our justice, that's the wing I'm a part of. Like period. But like the socialists, like a huge amount of the socialist movement in this country is not they don't want to give up what they have. They don't like even they don't understand even the white working man's plight and everything. Like they don't understand that how much more they have than the Negro, the average Negro. Like they don't put that into perspective. It's like, all right, so well, just give everybody like this and that. Or you like, let's start over. Let's start the whole system over, but not repay it. So it's like, all right, black person, that debt that you accumulated from years of trauma and pain and generational pain and getting locked out, that debt is white. I mean, how I benefited over is white zero. So everybody is zero now. So so I don't have to pay back, or I don't have to whatever I benefited from somebody else's oppressions, whether it be for me overtly or subvertly, I don't have to pay that back. Let's start over and give everybody the same thing. So that's why, you feel me? In this context, I think a lot of the socialists is bullshit, and I think that a lot of socialists don't even stand up to that principle. To be honest with you, they don't even stand up to that principle. But I think that when you talk to black people, is a way to kind of just get rid of that debt and kind of like absolve responsibility. Let's start new. Let's start clean without capitalism, because you wouldn't been here without capitalism. Blah blah blah. But I was here because of capitalism. How can you repay me and make my people whole? You know what I mean? Start a new system. What the fuck is that? Really?
Yep.
Like, so you gonna let what? Right. So
let's erase history, start from scratch, and forget everything that's happened to us.
That's how I feel about socialism. That's why I'm like, I don't care. If you're like unfair capitalism, but socialism,
yeah,
I want my people to be whole. I want us to hold power.
Yeah, real quick, Doc, before you dip into this, I want to say that's one of the things they pinged us with when we started talking about reparations a few years back. They were like, you just want to you want to participate in capitalism. That's all you want. You want black capitalism. That's the bullshit we heard. But
should it be a one-time check? What do you think how do you think reparations should take the face of? Anyone want to jump in? Everybody's muted. Y'all have to unmute yourselves.
Sorry. I've had this mulled over in my head a lot, and there's going to be a school of thought that some people of ADOS is going to disagree with me on, but I'm going to try to explain my position. Now, there are some who say we've been told countless times for years to wait. And so you have some who have the thought that we'd better get our reparations first before anything else. Before we get universal health care, before we get tuition-free public college, before we get a Green New Deal, before we get anything else, it is, the thought that we should have reparations first. As someone who does feel as strongly as I do about reparations, to me, it's not about whether we should or shouldn't. We definitely should, but it's about the order in how we get it. What do I mean by this? Reparations is great, but what good is reparations when that money gets absorbed by student loan debt? What good is reparations if it's absorbed by medical debt? What good is reparations if it's absorbed by greedy capitalistic landlords that know that you got a check and now they're going to exponentially raise your rent? My thing is I want reparations to be safeguarded. Reparations is supposed to be an equalizing and a repair of wealth inequality between Black people and white people in this nation. So if that's the case, then that means reparations should be a disposable income for Black people. Reparations is supposed to be wealth that we have yet to accumulate and is being given to us. So that being said, how do we safeguard against this? Unfortunately, to some members of ADOS, they're not going to like me hearing me say this, but things like universal health care, universal tuition-free public college, green infrastructure, all these universal programs have to be implemented first, not because we want to have to wait, but because These greedy capitalists, as soon as they see that we get a reparations check, it is gone. We won't have it anymore because we don't have these safeguards in place. So if we have tuition free public college and if everyone's college debt is cleared, that's money that your reparations does not have to go towards. If we have housing for all and we have, let's say just hypothetically, we had a nationalized rent control, then they won't be able to swipe your reparations money from under you so quickly because you need a place to live. And then on top of it, you have, well, we need a planet to live on. And so there's so many different things, excuse me, that could undermine us getting reparations, and we'll end up back in the same place that we were before. Now, if there's any counter arguments, I'm definitely willing to hear from them. But to me, it's about the order in which you get them, because I don't want the reparations to be taken away like that and us end up back in the same position. So this is one of the things why I want reparations to be safeguarded. And I think we should do the universal programs and the reparations simultaneously so that people who get them, aren't, they have that wealth that they can keep and pass down. That's the best way I can explain it.
Issues are still going to be there. They're not going away. I'm not a black capitalist, so I don't just want a check. I want the conditions materially for everyone to be improved. Then we can get reparations. And I know that there are people who argue we're always putting black issues on the back burner. The number one black issue to me is the climate, because we can't live on a planet that is uninhabitable to humans. So that's the first thing we got to address. Then we, like JB said, we need universal health care. We need a living wage for everyone. And here's my thing. Like, we do all of these social programs and then we get reparations, we'll be in a way better place, because as he just said, we get the reparations first. We're just basically breaking even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's my take on it. Anybody got something to say?
I got something I can add that boosts that backs both your points up, Jackie, because you can get a capitalist to support reparations. Tom Steyer is an example. There are plenty of capitalists that came out for reparations. They do that because they know they're going to get the money back. So black people hold the most medical debt. We hold a substantial amount of medical debt. About 33% of the population has medical debt. So if you pass reparations without having Medicare for all or a nationalized healthcare system, or without canceling student loan debt, you essentially just took black suffering and oppression and wrote a check to Big Pharma. If you do it without taking out our prison industrial complex, you pretty much going to get write a check to black Americans that they take back via civil asset forfeiture and regressive fees. So I don't want my reparations to go back to the same system of white supremacy I'm fighting against. So we should fight for and advocate for reparations, but we got to do it in a very class-conscious way. We can't allow the capitalists to ruin this. We already seen examples of I remember they had an area that just passed reparations, and it was implemented in a very capitalist way. So landlords are gonna benefit a lot, as our system is right now. They're gonna benefit. Wall Street gonna benefit. The prison industrial complex gonna benefit. The big pharma that charges a ton for prescription drugs and through medical debt, they're gonna prop up a ton. I want us to keep our money. I want our money to go to our community. And by having the leftist policies that we support via, like I said, I'm a big sponsor of UBI, like Jackie's saying as well, because we have the money to do this stuff. Mm-hmm. We should have UBI reparations, Medicare for all, living wage. We should have all this stuff because we gave billionaires trillions of dollars. So I don't want to hear the argument that we don't have the money. So that's where our mindset comes from. The people who are not nuanced, like, oh, I can't believe you guys coming out against reparations. No, we're not. Reparations are something that you should fight for. But you got to understand that we can't allow our money to go right back to the capitalist hands that are responsible for our oppression. That's what I'm advocating for. And also, one more thing I wanted to bring up to back your point up, Jackie, because you were talking about generational wealth. You mentioned that earlier on. I wanted to share this just to highlight the issue that you brought up. They was shared on Twitter a few days ago, but 1 in 5 Black Americans are experiencing poverty for the 3rd generation in a row. compare. Is it sharing? I don't know if it is. Yeah.
You can share.
Yeah, I didn't click the last button. Okay, I caught myself. Okay, so here it is. 1 in 5 Black Americans are experiencing poverty for the 3rd generation in a row, compared to just 1 in 100 white Americans. Late to this, but this is a study of remarkable grim look at economic mobility. And this is John. This is exactly going over the generational wealth that even a lot of poor white people benefit from. So it's not the same level. And once again, I stand in solidarity with anyone who in this class struggle. But if you don't have any generational wealth, like a lot of Black Americans, because of the new Jim Crow, because of the racist institutional capitalist system we live under, this is why we need reparations. So I just want to add those two, because I think that backed up what you said perfectly.
But go ahead, Doc. Handle your business.
Well, Fred Hampton said it wasn't black capitalism, it's socialism. He said there's a difference. And to what John was talking about, I have a different idea about socialism than what Americans think about socialism. I think that socialism is a system, a socioeconomic system that's devised for the benefit of the society, where capitalism is a system that's devised for the benefit of capital. And I say that, in order to be a socialist in this country, you gotta be opposed to capitalism, because capitalism only benefits a certain group of people, whereas socialism benefits the society. Now, if you take that perspective on socialism versus what Americans talk about when they talk about socialism, even what actual socialists talk about, who are talking about, we need to abolish capitalism and give the workers control and everything like that. When you devise a system that is for the benefit of society, that necessarily includes something like reparations. That has to include something like reparations. Because if you consider the fact that, Black people represent 13% of our society, and if we leave them out of the equation, then we're not doing for the whole society, So in order to speak to John here, you actually have to pay those reparations as part of that. And then we talk about how the whole society, Blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, whatever, how we all move together, how we all move forward together. But we can't have those discussions until we, like I say, pay the dues that we're owed, that we owe to the people that we owe them to, and get everybody straight, everybody square. And at that point, then we can talk about, whether or not we need to nationalize the labor force. I think we need to nationalize the labor force. We need to make it so that, my ability to live, my ability to eat, my ability to raise my kids up right isn't dependent on some capitalist, need to make profit. But we can't even get to that point until we do the prior work first and actually get all these debts that we owe settled. And so I agree a lot with John. The socialists in this country don't want to talk about that. And I think it's because they're tied to Karl Marx. And Karl Marx will say some kind of nonsense like any kind of racial discussion we have in the country is just a tool of capitalism, or any kind of moral or ethical discussion we have in the country is just capitalism dividing people. But we can't do that. I don't see it like that. I see socialism as a system that benefits and works for the benefit and the interest of all the people in society. And like I said, we can't do that without even something like reparations.
Oh, you mentioned Marx. Let's let Mud handle that one. Mud, what you got, baby?
I think we need to go ahead and talk about the left for a second. I think we really need to break down this ideology and go back to a lot of its roots. For this, I am going to go to this book called Karl Marx Racist. This book was published in 1979. It was written by a former socialist who kind of wanted to spill the beans after he lost interest in the ideology. So what he did is he kind of went through all of Marx and Engels' letters to each other. And what he found is all these offensive beliefs that were held by Karl Marx and Engels. Chapter 7, page 71, Karl Marx on the Negro. Marx and Engels are customarily depicted as admirers of Abraham Lincoln, resolute foes of chattel slavery, and courageous champions of Negro rights, Negro equality, and Negro freedom. There is scarcely an iota of truth to this interpretation. Publicly and for political reasons, both Marx and Engels posed as friends of the Negro. In private, they were anti-black racists of the most odious sort. They had contempt for the entire Negro race, a contempt they expressed by comparing Negroes to animals, by identifying black people with idiots, and by continuously using the appropriate term arrogant in their private correspondence. Since they wrote to each other in German, this meant inserting the offensive English word instead of using the correct German word again. Since neither revolutionary theorists had much interest in the Negro, and still less in the fate of Africa south of the Sahara, the quest for Marx and Engels' true views on the Negro has required a diligent and prolonged search. It has been rewarded, if that is the correct word, by some revealing expressions of gutter race hatred of the lowest sort. Marx wrote Engels on July 30th, 1862, that the Jewish Jürgen Lassalle was fortunately leaving London towards the end of the week for his native Germany, adding, "It is now absolutely clear to me, as both the shape of his head and his hair texture shows, he descends from the Negroes who joined Moses' flight from Egypt, unless his mother or grandmother on the paternal side hybridized with an Jürgen. Now the combination of Germanness and Jewishness with a primarily Negro substance necessarily creates a strange product. The pushiness of the fellow is also Jürgen-like." Wait, they never bring this up in the socialist meeting? If you're a little bit confused by what was just happening there, Marx has his own theory about black Egyptians and black Jews. Because apparently he thinks there was some race mixing going on in Egypt when the fucking Jews were making their exodus. So he looks at other Jews and by their appearance, he makes a determination about their purity as a fucking Jew. And of course, this is on the basis of them having the possibility of inferior nigger blood from Africa.
I mean, he's right. Like, Marx essentially was a white supremacist, and a lot of people that that go that route tend to have some of those tendencies also, as far as like not seeing the race issue as something that needs to be even addressed. Like a lot of them want to skip out on that type of discussion and reduce everything to a class discussion. And I mean, I don't know. It boggles my mind, because even if that's the way you felt, I would think at this point in time, seeing how that has not led to any political success, I would think you would be changing your position to try to, persuade other people to, fall in line. And like the only way you're going to actually get, black people on your side is if you tackle those type of issues. And essentially, if you go back and you look at the communists early, like when they did the pivot and started supporting the protests for the Scottsboro boys, that's like it's the thing that kind of pushed the communists into something that was kind of viable for a moment, from my perspective. But who am I,
They get bit of those TV Mud. What you talking about? And if you haven't seen, Mud just did an episode on Queen Mother Moore and how her involvement in the Communist Party in the 30s, but what the quote unquote American labor movement was coming to, coming to like the most, like kind of the power, like they were ascending the power. And she was a black woman in Harlem trying to be a part of this communist movement, this labor movement, but yet it was still segregation. It still was a white hierarchy within the communist movement. Like real talk, she was, this documentary is fucking crazy. Mud is a fucking genius. Like he put it together. He was talking for real. The niggas these genius. Anyway, but he put it together, and he kind of was just she was telling her story about like how we had the Negro meeting, but it was branches of the Communist Party that had the Polish Communist Party, the Italian Communist Party, the Irish Communist Party. But the Negro Communist Party always, you feel me? Like, and they operated autonomously with just those ethnic groups, but the Negro Party had to have somebody white around them. You feel me? Like, it's not like they came to the table and they had to have somebody, and they was always talking about, just remember though, it's about white and black solidarity. Nobody said this to the Italians. It's about Anglo-Saxon, and you know what I mean. So it's just so much layers to this shit. It's so much layers to the left movement and the communist movement when they're dealing with black people, and it just shows that everywhere we go, we don't have nobody. Like what? Like what we supposed to do? What we supposed to do? You know what I mean? Like look, you went to the left, they shit on us. Go to the right. You know the right really gonna shit us using that tool. Democrats, progressive, social. Look, so now it's like fuck it. We about to act out of our own interests. Period. You know what I mean? And try to grab some power out this bitch, and then maybe we can. You feel me? Maybe we can start when we grab power. Maybe we can really talk to these people at an equal, somewhat equal level. You know what I mean? Instead of people, they know our desperation. They know that we can be exploited. Even the left knows that. They know that we the most exploited people in the country. And they know they can still exploit us. You know what I mean? And use our issues to push
that path. Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, and I think, and this is one of the arguments I made early on with leftists right before I stopped ignoring them. If you want to make a change, you've got to shatter the social racial hierarchy, right? That happens with reparations. It is completely and utterly shattered. But if you don't want to do that, that means you're not trying to improve my life. You want me to, and one of the phrases I use is, you want us to have a more comfortable bottom space in this social racial hierarchy, right? You want us to have just be a more comfortable bottom. No, fuck you. You know, we've earned our space here. We've earned our stripes. We've done everything we're supposed to do over and over again, and we got fucked over. But you want to change the country without fixing us, and you want to start from scratch like everybody got problems because of capitalism. Now we're gonna fix everybody. Fuck your reparations. That's what I hear when I hear that.
Yeah. Well, could you imagine, like, we were talking about a little bit before we started about revolution. Like, what is revolution? Could you imagine how revolutionary it would be if white working class people and black working class people got together and actually started fighting for racial justice for black people in this country? Could you imagine how different that would change the society? I'm sure you probably can imagine that. You probably have imagined that.
Yeah, I can imagine it. The problem is it's never on our terms. That's the problem, right? Every time we try to unite, it's never on our terms. It's supposed to be we're gonna fix the world, but it's got to be the white folks' way, and we just hopefully get a disproportionate piece of it. Right?
But I want to say that I maybe I'm a little bit optimistic on this. That among white people, at least some white people, maybe not all white people, some white people, there is a sort of change of attitude. Like, if we're going to have these kind of conversations with people who were not, because the socialist movement is a white movement in this country.
Yeah.
And it's
Mr. Lighty admitted that.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, you just have to look at the numbers to find out that when you go to the Socialist Party, which is a party I'm affiliated with loosely now, I used to be more affiliated with them, but to go to the convention and see there's like 2 black people in the room and there's like 60 white people. And I don't know how that group of people can actually talk about racial justice, but not including black voices in that. But I think there's more of a movement among socialists, at least, maybe not progressives. Maybe they just pay lip service to it, to actually include, the solutions that are not solutions that we come up with, but the solutions that the different communities who we're supposedly working with, have come up with for themselves. Because I know, logistics and reality being one thing, the idea in the Socialist Party is the only way that groups that are oppressed can be liberated is by themselves. They're liberated by themselves. They don't need a white savior to ride in and fix things, because we're just going to screw shit up. And for me to go and tell you, this is what you need, and here's what we're going to do for you, that doesn't make any sense, because that doesn't affect your life, or that doesn't, talk about your own lived experience at all. It talks about my lived experience. This is what I think that you should need. This is what I think you should do. And so I think that there are at least some people on the left, maybe the far left, who actually have a different idea about the role that white people can play in not necessarily assisting, but supporting or doing whatever we possibly can to move out the roadblocks in y'all's way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because I think part of it is, and to give white folks a little bit of space here, America has conditioned, and violently so, white people and all other groups actually to stay away from helping us. right? Many white folks who were abolitionists, were killed, were threatened, were maimed, and their businesses destroyed. All kinds of stuff has happened, and that's the way America functions, right? But we've got to move away from that, right? We've got to break that wall, and I've written about it before. The quickest way to become a pariah is to fight for us. It really is, right? And that should tell you something. Like they say, if you find out the way you find out who's in power is who you the people that you can't criticize, right? And it's the other way around for us. If you want to find out who's on the bottom, try to help them, and you'll quickly find out who's on the bottom, right? So I think that conditioning is real. But this is a new age. We've got to get away from that.
Yeah.
Right. And some of it just gives people an excuse not to help because they don't give a fuck or they simply don't like us. Right.
Yeah.
But the other
Well,
side of that, you got to be prepared to get in this fight.
Yeah, and the one thing that white people can do, and this is one thing I know that we can do because we're responsible for most of the roadblocks that are being put in you guys' path, is we can actually work amongst ourselves to actually stop other white people from doing that and to clear out some of the roadblocks. That way, if you guys are coming forward, you guys are coming forward on your own power, on your own terms. You guys are doing whatever you need, but we just need to stop stopping you.
Yeah,
and
road grade. Yeah, be a road grader. Yeah,
yeah, right. That's what I see for white people who are concerned about racial justice and who are concerned about even moving the society forward in terms of equality or anything like that. That's one thing that we can do is we can stop stopping you. And for some reason, I don't understand why, but there are so many people who are so invested in putting roadblocks in the path, and you can say white supremacy. That's probably what it is, but whatever the reason, there are people that are really invested in doing that. And so it's my job as a white person, as a white revolutionary, to stop those people, because that's something I can actually do,
Yeah, I appreciate that. Because one of the other things is our precarity is other people's stability, right? As long as we're precarious, people feel like their life is more stable, right? Because as long as we, like white folks used to say, as long as I'm doing better than the niggas, everything will be okay, right? And a lot of people live like that, and you see it, and it's not just white folks. You will see a lot of folks that had just got here, recently, will quickly shit on us to move up, right? Like this dude Austin Chang in Michigan. He's a Nigerian guy that wants to run for governor, and his way of getting in was to shit on Black History Month, right?
And another comment you made a couple days ago, you said if you took over as governor, you'd cancel Black History Month in this state. Can you explain, your reasoning behind that? I think it's, for a lot of people, that was shocking to hear someone say that.
Now, so we're all Americans. We come from very different backgrounds. We have Norwegians, we have Finnish, we have Swedish, Polish, German. We have people from African backgrounds in this country. We're all immigrants who came to this country. And so therefore, even including the indigenous American people, the indigenous native people, the people from very different backgrounds, the thing that should unite us is the idea of the American identity, not because of the small group that we come from, because it's polarizing. If we're going to have a Black History Month, then what about a Finnish History Month? What happens to a Jewish History Month? What happens to a Swedish History Month? The list goes on and on and on. But these are all American history. So therefore, I feel that as governor, the way to move forward to stop this division and this polarization that's going on in our community is to forge a single American identity that we can all identify with first. No one is saying you should get rid of your background, and no one is saying that in the middle of that, there's not going to be any Black history being taught or people of that background history being taught. But also, how about Finnish history? How about Norwegian history? How about German history? How about the rest of the people that make up this great and beautiful state of Michigan also having their history being taught in an American History Month, which can encompass all of this? That's my point of view, and I stand by that statement.
and you see a lot of folks who are slave descendants from the United States trying to horn in on our Black History Month. It was for us from the beginning. It always was for us, and everybody's trying to horn in on it.
The thing that should unite us is the idea of the American identity, not because of the small group that we come from, not because of the small group that we come from.
And of course, you got your Pan-Africans who are like everybody Black, right? Right? So, yeah, that nonsense, right? Like other Black people don't believe in tribes and different nationalities and stuff. So a Jamaican can be a Jamaican, and I got to be African? Come on, dude, really? That don't make no goddamn sense.
But he up like Bumbleclad, me know from no Africa, man.
Exactly.
He'll let you know too.
Exactly. You can't even call a Jamaican Haitian and not get fucked up. You know what I mean?
Nothing. Me know from no Haiti, man. Me from Jamaica, man. They'll tell you to fuck up for that shit.
He will,
and they should, rightfully
up.
so.
He will fuck you, and rightly so. Yeah, I am who I am. I am who the fuck I say I am. You know, and that's some inside Negro baseball there, Doc. My bad.
No, that's all right. I talked to a dude from Trinidad who was like that too. He said, yeah, I'm not from Jamaica, dude. Don't ever make that mistake.
Yeah.
And he had a thick Trinidadian accent, and I can't begin to do it, but
yeah,
that's what he said.
We get it. Yeah. I mean, all of us make that mistake. As a younger man, I the Caribbean. I don't give a fuck. Now I understand that was rude. All right. So, I mean, but, we all live and learn, but, people want us to be everybody but who we say we are, right? Mm-hmm. Pan-Africanists want us to be more African than we are American, right? And socialists want us to be more socialist than we are Black. Everybody wants us to be something other than what we are. And we're fighting for our identity. We're fighting for our right to be here. We're fighting for our share of resources that we help build. And we built right. It's a good 75% of what's here, right? For those who don't understand, if you track wealth in this country, you can track all of it back to what we've done one way or another, or something we were like, for instance, the Homestead Act. You can trace it to something that we were left out of that somebody else got, right? So all these things, a lot of these things pivot on us, and it is what it is. People don't like to hear it, but fuck them. All right, Sam, what you got?
No, I just like I said, I think, we always have this conversation behind the scenes where, I'd like to get to Star Trek, Star Trek minus space travel, because I don't give a fuck about space travel, but I don't mind the rich oligarch assholes leaving. So for all of them who want to go, bye. Man, don't come back, and you don't get to take your money with you. So bye.
And when the Martians get in that ass and we'll come back here, help us. Go ahead.
We're done. So so I definitely, reparations first. I say it all the time. And then as for going forward, it's just, like I said, people aren't willing to give up a lot of things to have a better society. And that's what it really boils down to, because it seems like everybody just thinks that they're going to make their way to the top one day. So it's like, fuck everybody, but they're kind of screwing themselves and each other. I like Doc's idea about nationalizing the labor force. That completely makes sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so too. I wouldn't have mentioned, I guess. But
no, especially with automation coming as well. Because you think about if you nationalize the labor force, and then with automation, a lot of jobs are going to be cleared out anyways. So you have the jobs that you need, you keep those jobs, because that's pretty much going to be watching over the robots until the robots get so smart that they don't really need us. And then you're going to have to figure out what to do with people in their spare time after that, when we get to that point, but we'll probably be dead by then.
And there's also a lot of jobs to be created, like they said, jobs that can't be sent overseas, or jobs that can't be automated.
Reading to the elderly.
Yeah, elder care. You can't automate elder
wellness
care.
checks.
Yeah, exactly. You can't automate that. Yeah, you can put cameras in somebody's house or whatever.
But that's a lot. But nobody wants Big Brother. It's much nicer to have a young person come and knock on your door
and say, hey, how you doing? Okay. And everything okay? Yeah, absolutely.
Do you need groceries?
Yeah, there's only so much you can automate fixing streets, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
only, all this infrastructure work that needs to be done. We got decades of infrastructure work that needs to be done. And somebody told me it was something like 1,200 buses. I mean, 1,200 bridges in the state of Alabama can't take the weight of a school bus.
Oh my goodness.
That is crazy to me. That is absolutely nuts to me, right? And this is all the work that could be done. We could cut a check, so to speak, and get that work done. People could have jobs for at least the next 6 decades, right? Fixing and maintaining that work, and maintaining the work is actually takes longer than the initial fixing, right? Even if we use new fancy materials and go green and yada yada yada, there's still decades of work maintaining those things. So and there's plenty of work to be done, right? But we need to fix these primary things. But again, people don't realize it, but we're right. The country is currently trying to kill the working class. It is literally trying to destroy the working class so they can remake this country and have plenty of sources of cheap labor. We quit on the cheap labor shit. That's why that's why they don't love us no more. We're like, fuck that. We want to get paid like white folks, right? They quit on us. So they're just gonna import cheap labor until you guys realize what's going on. This is not xenophobic. This is not anti-immigrant. This is what being done to the country. Just look at the H-1B visa program, and then ask all the black folks that have skills in tech, ask them how they're doing driving Uber, right? So I mean, this is what's happening, right?
Yeah.
So you can play that game like you don't know and call me names. I don't give a fuck what you call me, right? Cut the check. So I mean, it's just things that I think about, and my brain is weird. Go ahead, Doc.
To build off of what you're talking about here and what Sam was mentioning with the nationalization of the workforce, I'd mentioned that our ability to live and feed our kids and this kind of stuff shouldn't be dependent on another person's desire to make profit. And
Absolutely.
as well, our ability to maintain our infrastructure or the jobs that need to be done in this country shouldn't depend on some company desiring to, charge 1.5 times as much as it should cost to build a bridge. What we need to do is we need to cancel all the private sector contracts we got in the country, and we need to put that money into the communities. And we need to say, okay, we need 3 bridges fixed in this community. We got this pool of people here. We're going to pay you this amount of money, and it shouldn't be $8.50 an hour or whatever the minimum wage is. It should be an actual living wage to get people who are not working right now, and maybe to some degree they might be on public assistance somehow, get them good jobs, because people, I think, and I really believe this, I think people would rather work than get assistance. And
You'd rather work, yeah.
Especially if you're getting a much better wage than you would otherwise. If you were trying to work for like McDonald's or whatever else, low skilled jobs, put all those people to work at good paying jobs. You can keep them working as long as you possibly can. They'll stay because they like jobs better than food stamps. And then you don't have to pay that extra money out to some private corporation. And Sam was really good at pointing out, this is different from reparations. Of course, this is an actual jobs program, and it actually benefits white people and black people, poor people alike in the community. And I think that is probably closer to socialism than whatever these Bernie Sanders people or AOC is talking about. Who are just talking about giving tax breaks to small businesses or Medicare for all and shit like that.
Yeah, those people are just trying to. They see all these people getting ready to age out. I mean, really age out like death, or in office, and they're just trying to replace those folks with these younger people like AOC, in order to have some sort of majority. But obviously they're not going to do anything with it. When they got a chance to punch back, they don't punch back. You can only lay on your back for so long. Jesus Christ.
Well, the Democrats actually can lay on their back for quite a lot longer.
Yeah. I'm talking about the squad and all these other folks.
Yeah.
Who talk a good game and Twitter the world of fire. But when they have an opportunity, like when they had a chance to force a vote on Medicare for all, they blew it.
Yeah.
And all these folks around them who are supposed to be leftists gave them room to do so. They protected them. The Young Turks and all these other clowns, right? They just want the power. They don't give a fuck who gets hurt. They want the money and the power. And of course we get left out of that. We're not even part of that calculation, but we're changing that shit on that ass. All right, Mud, what you got, man? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, nah, I just think that the whole just the political and economic infrastructure of the country is not designed to give black people massive amount of resources. It's just not that way because we don't have reparations. We never finished Reconstruction. So just the political infrastructure of how resources get distributed throughout all numerous states is not designed for us to get resources like that. You know what I mean? Like it's not designed for that. Like it's designed for us to kind of get a crumb here and a crumb there while everybody else gets
Subsistence, yeah, at best, subsistence.
And the fact that we getting resources is really because, like I'm saying, like after slavery, they didn't finish the job of Reconstruction, and then gave us 100 more years of Jim Crow, and nothing has really been done to kind of undo that, like on a massive scale. Like Reconstruction was really a massive effort. Like it was crazy. Like it was specific towards the descendants of slavery, and it was a massive effort. That's why you see a fucking black senator in Mississippi in 1872. You're like, what the fuck is this shit? Where
that Negro come from?
What? Yeah. A black lieutenant governor in Mississippi? What? Because the amount of it takes a whole focus to really enfranchise us. And people lazy. Not only people lazy, people are content with how the way society running. And they're like, yo, Negroes are so hurting. They hurting so bad. If you just give them a little bit of anything, you should be grateful because nobody want to give you nothing. Yeah, it's like, what? We owe so much. Like,
we're speaking about expense. I suppose there are several ways to address oneself to some attempt to define what that word means here. Let me put it this way, that from a very literal point of view, the harbors and the ports and the railroads of the country, the economy, especially of the southern states, could not conceivably be what it has become if they had not had, and do not still have indeed, and for so long, so many generations, cheap labor. I am stating very seriously, and this is not an overstatement, that I picked the cotton and I carried it to market and I built the railroads under someone else's whip for nothing. For nothing. The Southern oligarchy, which has until today so much power in Washington, and therefore some power in the world, was created by my labor and my sweat, and the violation of my women and the murder of my children. This, in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And no one can challenge that statement. It is a matter of historical record.
Who are you talking to? You know who he is? Like the whole infrastructure is not designed to give us massive amount of. To me, without reparations in the Black agenda, they'll never have that political infrastructure to even get the resources passed down to us. And like you said, you already know, we just had the coronavirus bills. We just spent, I don't know, nobody is counting the numbers. We just spent $5 trillion in a year. We just spent five. Okay. American Heroes Act, CARES Act, you feel me? Like American Rescue Plan, 1.9 trillion, 2 trillion, 9 billion.
And you're not counting when they were giving the banks $1 trillion a day to stabilize the economy. Everybody skips over that number because they don't include it in the other figures.
That's going out the back door. Absolutely. That's going out the back door.
But I feel like based off the criteria that we set and based off everything, it's easier to give us reparations and easier to give us a whole specific Black agenda than it is to rearrange the whole American healthcare system. I'm talking about, it's harder to pass it because the country anti-Black, but it's
I bet
easier
you they
to
give
implement.
Asians reparations Asians reparations for these verbal hate crimes before they give us reparations.
Yeah, I know when coronavirus started off in New York, they said they had a whole Asian hotline like, yo, it's somebody called me Kung Flu, come arrest them. Like,
Kung
what
Flu.
the fuck? Like,
I never heard
they called me Kung Flu, arrest them. With him, like with George Floyd, police about to kill me. Shut up, nigga, down. What?
Yeah.
Like, you feel me? Like, so that's, what the fuck are you? What? So like,
but they set up their own hotline. That's the thing. We can have a hotline too, but we're broke. So get some coins together and we can start a whole anti-black campaign. But that's the difference between a community that has money and a community that doesn't have money. Asian community has more money than white people. And Chinese, Japanese is mainly the Chinese that have been having these incidents, and Chinese people have more money than white people. So that's why the campaign's coming together so quick. And that's why it's organized.
I like to mention something
I
about
love you, Sam. I love you. I just want to know. I just want to know, Sam. What is what's the maternity? The birth maternity rate, whatever. What's the birth disparities between Asian women and white women in America? Asian Americans.
I think they don't have any. It's like the same. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Okay. You don't know?
No.
Okay. All right. Yeah. That's crazy, ain't it? That's crazy to do for game. All right.
Yeah, I like to mention something about Reconstruction since John brought it up. We've got to remember what ended Reconstruction was the assassination of a president and white terrorism. And they were connected. Right? Yeah. White folks wanted their land back and they wanted their slaves back, and they got both. It's just the state paid for it. The state took care of all the ancillary costs of having slaves. They wanted their land back and they got their slaves back through terrorism and killing a president. It is what it is. White folks did that. We didn't do that. All right, go ahead. Just want to make that clear. Mud, you back yet, brother?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, to add on to John's point, not only did they pull that money out of nowhere, we also have a government that's running $1 trillion deficits on top of all of that. So, like, the reality is that we need to embrace MMT and realize that the government has the money to do reparations and has the money to do a bunch of these programs that a lot of people want to do on the left. And honestly, if we could get our the politicians to reflect the kind of the attitude of the people, like, we could change the society in drastic ways to where we can damn near make everyone happy.
As mentioned, I was going to bring my props, and I ended up not doing it because we would have gone an extra 15 minutes. But very quickly, most of the audiences that I talk to are in the financial community. For whatever reason, I end up talking to lots and lots of people who are financial advisors, financial planners, and there will be rooms with 400 or 800 or 1,400 people. And these are people who work in finance, so you would expect that they would, know something about money and finance. And yet I go in and you talk to them about the government's, but now let me remind you, they tell all their clients, spend less than you earn, save, and pay down your debt. That's the advice to every one of their clients. And it's perfectly rational advice. So they come into that with that mindset, and they believe the federal government, like everybody else, should play by that set of rules. Then I do a little exercise with them, and I say, okay, let's find out whether you understand the deficit and the national debt. So you would think that they would, because again, they work with money and finance. They don't have a clue. They hate it and they're mad at the deficit until I get done with them. And so here's what I do. I go in and I say, okay, I'll play the role of the government. And so I have my basically monopoly money, but it has my picture on it. And so they're Kelton bucks, right? So I'm the government, so I'm going to spend some money into the economy. You're all in the private sector of my economy, businesses, households. And so I'm going to spend 10 into the economy. So I hand someone 10. Now they have 10, right? And I say, but I'm going to collect taxes now. So I'm going to tax back 7. So they hand me back 7. And I say, what did I do? I ran a deficit. So I go and I scroll it down, -3. Government of Kelton. So now you're supposed to be very angry at me because I did this irresponsible thing called running a budget deficit. My -3, how mad are you? You're sitting there holding 3. Where'd you get it? You got it from me. And you wouldn't have that 3 if I hadn't put in more than I took out. So now they're thinking, And I say, but wait, let's do it the proper way. Let's balance the budget. So give me the money back. We'll do it again. So I spend 10 in. I tax 10 out. Now I've balanced my budget. I go right down. Balanced budget, smiley face. Everybody is supposed to be happy. Are you happy? No, I miss my 3, right? I miss my 3. So I say, well, okay, hang on. Let's go do it the Clinton way, because this is what really excites the Democrats, right? Those Clinton surpluses. So But now, you have a problem, because in order for me to run a surplus, I have to collect more from you than I put back into the economy. So taxes have to be higher than government spending. So now you see yourself going into the red so that I can go into the black. So you have the deficit, I have the surplus. How do you feel? And they go, miserable, right? Give me back my deficit. So the point is, people don't have the foggiest idea. And then you do the national debt. What is the national debt? I spend 10 into the economy. I tax 7 out. You're holding 3 Kelton dollars. I hold up 3 treasuries. I also have them laminated with my picture. And these are treasuries, right? And I say, who would like to buy these 3 Kelton treasury bonds? And sure enough, the person in the audience who's got the 3 Kelton dollars that don't pay any interest would like to swap them for the treasuries, which pay interest. Now you feel even happier, because not only did I give you money, I'm subsidizing your savings with free interest money, right? Which is what's happening when the government borrows. The money to buy the bonds comes from the deficit spending itself. So you're not even out anything. You're up, your wealth is up, your income is up. The problem is with the distribution, because who holds those treasuries? They're not equitably distributed across the economy. They're mostly concentrated in the hands of the wealthy, who can afford to save and put money into investment vehicles like treasuries and so forth. So it isn't that the national debt is a bad thing, it's your asset. My liability, it's your asset, right? And you're getting a risk-free asset, and I'm paying you to have it.
Like I think that the only issue is like the how do we like deal with the people who are pushing the open border stuff, because like it's been said before, you can't have like a welfare state and open borders because you can't do it for the whole world.
Something that is in what you said about being a democratic socialist is a more international view. But I think if you take global poverty that seriously, it leads you to conclusions that in the US are considered out of political bounds. Things like sharply raising the level of immigration we permit, even up to a level of open borders, about sharply increasing
open
the amount
borders.
of foreign aid.
No,
Open borders.
that's a Koch brothers proposal. The
Really?
idea, of course, I mean that's a right-wing proposal, which says essentially there is no United States.
But it would make a lot of the
me.
global poor richer, wouldn't it?
And it'd make everybody in America poor. Then you're doing away with the concept of a nation state. And I don't think there's any country in the world which believes in that. If you believe in a nation state, or in a country called the United States, or UK, or Denmark, or any other country, you have an obligation, in my view, to do everything we can to help poor people. What right-wing people in this country would love is an open border policy. Bring in all kinds of people who work for $2 or $3 an hour. That would be great for them. I don't believe in that. I think we have to raise wages in this country. I think we have to do everything that we can to create the millions of jobs. You know what youth unemployment in the United States of America today? If you're white, a white kid, high school graduate, 33%, a Hispanic, 36%, African-American, 51%. You think we should open the borders and bring in a lot of low-wage workers? Or do you think maybe we should try to get jobs for those kids? So I think from a moral responsibility, we've got to work with the rest of the industrialized world to address the problems of international poverty, but you don't do that by making people in this country even poorer.
So then what are the responsibilities we have? If that kind of zero-sum calculation, right, between someone who is poor by US standards, but is quite well off by, say, Malaysian standards, redounds so easily to the benefit of the person in the US, and how do we think about that responsibility? I guess I'm asking here I agree, you have a nation-state structure. You always are going to. The politics don't allow anything else. But I guess philosophically the question is, how do you weight it? How do you think about what the foreign aid budget would be? How do you think about poverty abroad?
And I'll tell you why. Well, first of all, again, as a United States Senator from Vermont, my first obligation, frankly, is to make certain that kids in my state and kids all over this country have the ability to go to college, which is why I am supporting tuition-free public colleges and universities. I believe we should create millions of jobs rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure and ask the wealthiest people in this country to start paying their fair share of taxes. I believe we should raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour so people in this country are not living in poverty. And I think we end the disgrace of some 20% of our kids living in poverty in America. Now, how do you do that? What you do that is understand there's been a huge redistribution of wealth in the last 30 years from the middle class to the top 1/10 of 1%. Now, the other thing that you understand globally is you have horrendous imbalance in terms of wealth in the world. As I mentioned earlier, the top 1% will own more than the bottom 99% in a year or so. That's absurd. And that takes you to programs like the IMF and so forth and so on. But I think what we need to be doing as a global economy is making sure that people in poor countries have decent paying jobs, have education, have health care, have nutrition for their people. That is a moral responsibility. But you don't do that, as some would suggest, by lowering the standard of American workers, which has already gone down very significantly.
Like, that's basically it. But yeah, I think that we all understand what the solution is. It's just that we got to get the will.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think one good John. I mean, yeah, but Mud brings up a good point that one of the things I said early on in this fight was, if you want to turn a lefty into a fiscal hawk, bring up reparations. First thing that comes out of their mouth is, where's that money going to come from? Motherfucker, you just talking about Medicare for all, right? You forgot about MMT that quick. MMT disappears when you bring up reparations. It is wild. I just want to make that point because I'm an asshole. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're not lying. That's the truth. I mean, it's the hypocritical thing that they do. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, this is the best thing. In the United States, we got a fiat currency that the whole rest of the world wants. So we can print as many dollar bills as we want to print. We could print $1 that's $6 trillion dollar bill. You know what I'm saying? Like one big piece of paper that says $6 trillion on it. And give it to the bank and say, here's our debt. Peace. And now let's work on reparations.
That's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's all it takes. And we could do that. We could do that. It doesn't even take an act of Congress. It just takes someone in the print shop putting a 6 trillion on there instead of a 1. And there you go.
The 6T bill, baby.
Yeah.
T bill's a whole different thing now.
Yeah.
Yeah, family. I think, well, I mean, this whole show is about getting the left on their, getting them back on their ball. Like, but I guess, you know, historically, the left really hasn't been for us, honestly. You know, I mean, if we look at the major movements in this country, around labor, around healthcare, we are a secondary thought at best. I used to think that the left was our best hope of getting good policy, right? Until again, we start talking about reparations, and it's like, oh shit, that progressive just turned into fucking
Paul Ryan.
Yeah, it turned him into fucking, I don't know, Mr. Fiscal Hawk from, I don't know, it turned him into to Rush Limbaugh in the blink of an eye.
Yeah,
You know, a minute ago we were talking about Medicare for all and all this money flying out the door for everybody and everything. You mentioned reparations. Ooh.
I seen it in real time on Twitter. I seen it on real time. MG like, what about reparations? Shut up, Negro. Shut up. I'm gonna put you back in check. Whoa. You talking about the Green New Deal though? But we need a Green New Deal, Negro. I'm like,
listen, I've been in groups too, and these conference calls talking about reparations is scary. I was like, but you were just talking about housing for all. What are you talking about? So we're gonna give everybody a house, but we can't talk about reparations.
and that's the wild thing. If you pay reparations, the bill for everything else is a lot cheaper. You know what I mean? It's the logic to this, right?
You got to think, if 50% of the homeless are Black, if you give Black people reparations, boom, 50% of those people are no longer homeless because they got money to go get a place.
Within 5 years, right? Within 5 years, it's over, right? And that's part of the reason why.
And then you just throw money at the other 50% after that. Like, cool, we got the Negroes done. Boom, boom. Now we can knock out the rest of poverty. Boom, boom, done. Everybody's okay. Boom.
But that's part of the problem, Sam. Our suffering drives their movement, right? Because we're the core of the suffering in this country. If we get fixed, their movement dies.
That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid that if Black people get fixed, that we're going to stop fighting. But they don't understand that we're justice people. So we're not. Most of us won't take our money and run away with it. Most people take their money and put it together like Voltron and want to fight.
Yeah, and want to help people. Yeah, that's who we are. That's who we've always been, and that's the reason why we've been held down so long. Because people don't want an egalitarian society. So those people talking about with egalitarian leanings, keep them out. right? And the left just doesn't. Well, they don't want to understand. I started to say they don't understand. They don't want to understand
Correct.
because they want us to get like they say suffer till revolution. That's our suffering they're talking about, not anybody else's suffering. They want us to suffer until revolution,
Yep.
right? That's what they want. So I mean, it is what it is. Doc, what you got, man?
Well, I was just
Word
going
for
to say
this
that
conversation.
the crazy small socialist party of the United States, and I'll make a little plug for this. I think they're on board with reparations. I think they have reparations as a campaign, especially last year. I think someone clued them in.
Well, the Green Party had him in there, but they had a weird version of it, right?
Yeah, I don't really know what the Green Party's doing. I'm not part of them, but
yeah. Or the socialist? What organization are you talking about?
the SPUSA, the old Socialist Party of America. Yeah, right, because they're like 750 people. But I will say that the vice president on the Green Party ticket is a member of the Socialist Party USA, Angela Walker.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that largely because of that, I mean, she's been pretty big with reparations. I think largely because of her efforts, the Socialist Party are taking on that cause, at least as part of a campaign. And 750 people, that's not much, but it's definitely
laser
not
focused. They could be helpful, right?
Yeah.
And the right type of reparations, because
Right.
there's a lot of folks that say things like we've just had in Evanston and they're trying to do in Oregon, and there's a bill in California. No, the right type of reparations that we're talking about, like From Here to Equality, the book by Dr. Sandy Darity,
Sure.
that's the brand of reparations that most of us are leaning towards, right? And if we can get some more organizations on board with that. I mean, it's a logical move,
Yeah.
right? So if we can get people going in that direction and fighting this fight publicly, let's talk.
Yeah. I don't see why, I don't think the Socialist Party will ever actually be the thing that pushes it over the line, because
But more the merrier. Coalition.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
If we can bring 750 people to fight, I think that'd be all right.
And we can shame the shit out of DSA. That'd be fun.
Oh,
I love shaming assholes.
They have no shame. Have you seen Jimmy Dore's been dragging the life out of them.
Yeah, but he ain't getting on this reparations train. I'm gonna have to get in Jimmy's ass. But
not at all.
You gotta get him out of here. Remember when Jimmy does something? I fought a black kid at school and I didn't want to fight him. He had a little tear. But I fought him because he was black. I can't with you, look at the black dude that went to the Klan. Look at the black dude that still went to the Klan.
Welcome back. I'm with the legend Daryl Davis. Daryl, thank you again for coming on. Daryl, I wanted to start this segment off with a clip from Morgan Freeman that I thought was really just an interesting perspective on the idea of Black History Month. This was an interview Morgan did years ago, and I just wanted to hear what your thoughts were on that.
Black History Month you find ridiculous. Why? You're going to relegate my history to a month? Oh, come on. What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? Well, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism?
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. I know you as Mike Wallace. You know me as Morgan Freeman.
I thought there was a really interesting concept about not having Black History Month. I feel like if I went out to the world and said, let's get rid of Black History Month, I would be called a bigot and a racist. But Morgan Freeman brings up an interesting point of that Black history is American history. What is your take on that?
Well, my take on that is this. I've been saying that very same thing longer than Morgan Freeman. I've been saying it now for 22 years.
Boogaloo Boys ain't got that. I said, yo, get the fuck out of here with this bullshit, Jimmy. Get out of here with this Boogaloo Boys ain't that bad. Get out of my face with this bullshit, bro. You bugging out.
All right, John, final words, man. What we got?
Yeah, I just think that Doc seems like he's a true socialist, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's a true white socialist. He really believes in.
Doc was awesome.
to make the motherfucking country better. Like, you know what I mean? He understand, and he also understands that, from what it seems to me, that he understands that, you know, putting black people whole can make us a better fighting force and making the whole country better. You know what I mean? Like real talk, like making us whole is easier to achieve his goal of a utilitarian, egalitarian, whatever. You know, I can't pronounce the words, man. You know, but you know, I'm talking a more equal society. You know, like having a more equal society and a more fair society, a real America that we live on our principles. Like, you know, says that reparations comes first, not
and it would reverberate around the world. Absolutely.
Yeah. Real talk, like reparations comes first, not before any type of universal program when you have not undone the damage of slavery, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, and all this other shit that we got to go through. You know what I mean? Like, how can you feel me? Like, how can you claim that you're about everybody being equal, but you ain't even take real steps to do the things that made the most people in this country as the most unequal? You ain't even take them steps to even do that, and you want them to get on your side just because you don't got nothing, and they gonna give you something? Like, what the fuck is that? So, you know what I mean? That's how I feel about the socialists. You feel me? Like, real shit, like, live up to what you say then. If you're going to be a socialist in the D1, I ain't got no problem with you or nothing like that, but I put my people first, though. So, you feel me? This is society I live in. I can't, I don't lean left or right. I lean Negro. Whatever's best for the Negro, that's what I'm with.
That's what
and I feel like
does.
The left is better, but it's not. You feel me? Like, but they still they use that, the fact that they are better, to kind of like fuck us up a little bit. And you gotta stop this shit.
Same Democrats do with the Republicans, but nobody's really on our side,
Absolutely. Yeah. That's my last thought.
Mom and poppiness. Sam, what you got? Final words, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Give me my money. Then do wealth redistribution. I say I want reparations, and then I want y'all to do wealth redistribution, and then we can actually start having a serious conversation. Like, so, you know, I'm all here for. I like Doc's idea about nationalizing the workforce, though, because we need a federal jobs guarantee. We need all that good stuff because climate change is coming. It is here. We need to be building new cities and high ground sustainability. We need to be on all kinds of other stuff right now, and we're talking about pennies and fixing fucked up freeways for cars that we shouldn't even be driving right now. I'm just saying, like, we need to start talking about redoing the way we do transportation in this country as a whole. But but then you're talking about fucking up a whole nother industry. But gotta do what you gotta do. Like, you know, they did foul shit to get it this way. Anyway, so little history lesson. I live in Los Angeles. So in Los Angeles used to have streetcars and little train systems and stuff. And Ford bought up all the trains and shut them down so people would drive more. Wow, I did not know so there's a reason why they have all these cars and all these freeways and stuff like that. So there's just a lot of stuff we need to do going forward, and we could easily do it by putting money in people's pockets and giving people comfortable American lives that we've been advertising all these years. But they don't want to do it, and we're too weak to force them to do it. So I don't know what to say. This is why I teeter between apathy and fatalism on a regular basis, because it's just
that's some teetering for your ass. God damn, girl.
Because it's just like, because I meet young people, like, you know, I was just going to junior college and I was meeting like 18, 19, 20-year-olds who were just like, well, you know, it just is what it is. So what are you going to do? And I'm like, you're like 18. You ain't got no kids. You ain't got no career. Like, if you can't fight now, you're never going to fight. So I don't know. Like, so I want to see people do better. Like, I want to see people actually, I don't know, trying to make a better future for everybody, because this ain't it. And you would think this pandemic should have been the thing that should have sparked everything to make things better. And it didn't. Like, you got to think about, we had all those protests last summer. What did Black people get for those protests? Nothing. Like, nothing. Like, legislatively.
Got Joe Biden.
Awesome. Yeah, exactly. We got Jim Crow Joe. Like, come on. So it's just, I want to be excited, and I want to have faith going forward, but I just need to see more movement from people. Like, the good thing is, like, I meet people like Doc, and I'm like, okay, good. You know, I got Edie. I keep meeting people. I'm like, okay, so I'm like, it's out there. So I guess it's good that we're all kind of linking together little by little. But it's like, will it be fast enough before things get worse? Because I have a feeling like, okay, great. When coronavirus is over, great, but we're still going to deal with the economic fallout from that. A lot of these businesses are not coming back. And what happens when they start cutting off people's unemployment? It doesn't come back because the economy's open again. Get back to work. Especially the gig workers. They're like,
Yep. Yeah, we got a lot of work to do. That's for sure.
A lot of work. So that's my final thought. Sorry, nothing happy. Just.
Well, we're glad to have you around, Sam.
I'm not here for my sweet words, my sweet thoughts.
We love you anyway. All right, thanks, Sam. Mud, what you got, man?
Yeah, I just want to alleviate any fears that socialists will have that reparations will completely take Black people out of the socialist fight. Reparations, like, for the most part, the idea is like really just to stabilize us. It's not going to like make us all mega wealthy. It's pretty much going to put us on par with like a lot of the socialists that are out there now who are kind of like middle class, upper middle class. Yeah. And these are like the type of people that are heading the movement, and they're like, I shouldn't say heading the movement, but in leadership positions. And they're concerned about us not being committed to the fight based on a struggle that they never experienced, but somehow they committed to the fight. Also, like this, I think that they missed the point. Part of why we aren't like, a lot of us aren't to the left as far as like being like mixed in with their movements and organizing with them, is based on past failed promises of like improving our situation. Like you've been holding that carrot on a string in front of us for so long that, you know, we're no longer interested. So like, if you actually did that, like if you actually got us some type of victory, we would be more invested in the fight, is what I'm saying, essentially. And that victory would have to be reparations.
Yeah, these are facts. Yeah. All right. So everybody, Doc, what's your final words? Since you're the guest here, you got any final words for us?
Well, speaking for all white people,
I appreciate that. Somebody got to.
Yeah, it's about time. The way I see it is, and the way I see it is a little bit different, I suppose, than what other people do. But the way I see it is, if I'm able to do anything, or if we're able to do anything as a society to help Black people, all right, especially with reparations, and I'm really keyed into that because, you know, I haven't talked with Sam quite a bit, and I've learned quite a bit while doing prep for that show and also for this one. You know, it seems to me that helping the Black people in this country also helps white people, because it kind of takes any kind of competition for these resources, even if we assume that resources are limited, which we shouldn't. It takes that off the table. So we're not competing with one another. We actually have a common ground then to stand on, to actually say, okay, we have common cause with one another, and here's how we can actually work together instead of working at cross purposes. And it seems to me a very reasonable, a very easy thing to come to that conclusion. And so, you know, I think that part of the thing that we got to do is we got to just, you know, I don't even know how to do it. I don't even know what to say, but it has to come to a more general, you know, understanding and more general view of that among white people, I think. And whether or not that'll ever happen, I don't know. I mean, I've been waiting for socialism for God knows how long, and we're not any closer to that than we were when I started, you know. So, you know, John might be right. It might be way easier to do reparations, and then we can talk about all the rest of the stuff later on. You know, maybe that should be the first stop. Maybe that should be the first thing we do.
Yeah.
You know, I agree with reparations first. That's my motto.
Reparations first. All right. So just for my final words, just a big piggyback off what Doc said. You know, we are changing people's minds slowly. Well, actually, as Sam says, we're changing people's minds faster than what happened with gay marriage, which is wild to me. So we're slowly changing people's minds, and we're getting closer to where we need to be on this issue. And we need. Did you want to say something, Sam? Oh, you just enjoying that sandwich. All right, so I just man, that looks good. I'm hungry as hell. All right, so but again, to piggyback off what Doc was saying, we got to stop. We have to start moving forward, and we're making waves. There's a logical argument to be made for reparations. Harm done to a specific group of people. Let's get this policy in order, right? And on the political side, people have argued that. I mean, I've been talking a lot about fights I've had with lefties for a while here, but many people on the left say there is no political argument for reparations. When justice stopped being a political argument for anything, justice and freedom stopped being a political argument for anything. I don't know when that happened, right? So a lot of this is people don't want to have this fight because they know it is a hard fight, but we're making it easier for you. We're changing people's minds every day, right? And there's always going to be hardcore people that don't want us to succeed. They just simply don't want us to succeed. They don't think we deserve anything, and it is what it is, right? We understand that. We just need enough. Just need enough. Join us in our fight or get out the way. That's really what it boils down to.
Listening to Reset Race, you now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race, you're now tuned in to Reset Race. What? Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake. Lineage go back to U.S. Southern plantations. Lineage, Jim Crow and mass incarceration. Redlining lynchings. We are old from this nation. You're not about justice if you ain't for reparations. MG the wise one. Cousin mother intellectual. Samantha bringing fire. Anti-black. We pressing you. No permanent friends and no permanent enemies. The backbone of the country. To win, you need our energy. You gon' see. Listening to Reset Race. You now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake.
Until you do right by me, everything you think about is gonna crumble.
So having personal retirement accounts is another way of making a future retiree benefits more secure for their retirement. And also, do you believe that personal retirement accounts as a component to a system of solvency does help improve solvency? Because when you have a personal retirement account policy, it's accompanied with a benefit offset. With that feature in place, do you believe that personal retirement accounts can help us achieve solvency for the system and make those future retiree benefits more secure?
Well, I wouldn't say that the pay-as-you-go benefits are insecure in the sense that there's nothing to prevent the federal government from creating as much money as it wants and paying it to somebody. The question is, how do you set up a system which assures that the real assets are created which those benefits are employed to purchase? So it's not a question of security. It's a question of the structure of a financial system which assures that the real resources are created for retirement as distinct from the cash. The cash itself is nice to have, but it's got to be in the context of the real resources being created at the time those benefits are paid, so that you can purchase real resources with the benefits, which of course are cash.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, everyone. I am Mariana Mazzucato. I'm the director of the Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose, which is collaborating with the British Library on this wonderful series, which hopefully you all have a brochure on, called Rethinking Public Value and Public Purpose in 21st Century Capitalism. IIPP is a UCL institute. It's actually a department, so we have our own teaching program trying to bring back this concept of public value to the center of economic thinking. You'd think that that word even existed in economics. Unfortunately, it doesn't. We have words like public goods, but they're really narrow words that have actually strangely been used to delimit the areas where public policy is allowed to tread. Just think of the BBC when it's told it's crowding out private broadcasters, so at best it's allowed to do documentaries about giraffes in Africa, but how dare it do soap operas and talk shows? That's for business. And so the word public value that we're trying to revive is really a much more cross-cutting concept of how you actively co-create and co-shape the markets of the future, as opposed to just fixing market failures in existing defined markets that can be extremely problematic. We have about 7 new lectures still to go. The whole lecture series is trying actually to bring designers, architects, musicians, and of course economists to think about this concept together, including, you know, just because an area is free to access, does it actually mean it's public? Just because Google is free, does it mean it's really public? So how do we create proper public realms through public-private partnerships? How do we really engage in a not tokenistic way, civil society in that endeavor? And that brings me to tonight's lecture. We are extremely proud and happy to have Stephanie with us. She's actually on the advisory board of the Institute. We had a very interesting discussion today about what it means to have a mission-oriented type of economic policy. But Stephanie is the professor of public policy and economics at Stony Brook University. And previously, she was the chief economist of the U.S. Senate Budget Committee and a senior advisor to Bernie Sanders himself. And I think she'll be reflecting on that experience tonight. She was the founder and editor-in-chief of the top-ranked blog New Economic Perspectives and a member of the Top Wonks network of the nation's best thinkers. In 2016, Politico, I said that like an Italian, Politico recognized her as one of the 50 people across the country, the US, that is most influencing the political debate. And her book, The State, the Market, and the Euro, published in 2001, actually predicted the debt crisis, which was much more than just a debt crisis, an economic crisis, in the Eurozone and elsewhere. And her subsequent work correctly predicted that, first of all, quantitative easing wouldn't lead to high inflation, and 2, that government deficits wouldn't cause a spike in US interest rates. And 3, God, these are very carefully written notes by PhD students, that the S&P downgrade wouldn't cause investors to flee the treasuries, and 4, that the US would not experience a European-style debt crisis. Instead, a whole other mess of things happened, which she also predicted. Anyway, so this is enough for me, and all I can say is that this is an incredibly important lecture tonight, because actually thinking about what do we mean by a public budget, how it's different from a family budget, which of course is constrained by certain factors, will hopefully also allow us to really think about that topic that we talked about today in the advisory board, which is let's actually think about what we want to be investing in, the kind of results, the missions, the outputs that we want to create in the economy, and then let's just create the budget to get us there versus the reverse. Here's your limited budget, and within that, think in a very narrow way what you can do. So Stephanie, thank you so much for coming all the way from the US for tonight's event, and we're all extremely excited to have you.
Well, thank you very much. She's it was a bit of a spoiler. So I'm going to try to fill in some gaps because you nailed it in terms of, no, not in a bad way, in a good way, in a good setup way. The way a good introduction goes, you let them know this is what the speaker is going to come and do. And that's exactly what I'm going to come and do. So if I had to characterize the way that I approach economics, I guess it is fair to say that I am somewhat of a contrarian. If I'm here today to tell you that when it comes to the British government, money is no object, imagine the space that that opens up. When Mariana talks about not taking a fixed allocation of pounds and saying, this is your budget, go see what you can do with it, if instead you were told, what is it you would like to do? What kind of an economy would you like to build, right? What are the missions you're trying to achieve in the economy? What is the budget you need to carry out those missions? And you could fit the budget to those goals. What would that look like? Could we even do that? Is that even realistic? I think it's fair to say that both here and in the US and across Europe and mostly around the world, we do it the other way around, right? We start with the notion that money is in fact an object. And that's why we hear politicians talk about the need to find the money. Right? How are you going to find the money? You want to build infrastructure? You want to do healthcare? You want to do education? Where are you going to get the money, right? Finding the money becomes a really critical, it's at the starting point. You don't leave the starting gate until you answer the critical question, how will you pay for it? Where will the money come from? And my position is that this traps us unnecessarily, and it traps us in a frame of mind where we're all basically walking around as if we're still operating on a gold standard. Because that's what it means to say, find the money. It's like there's something out there. It's money, it exists. Where is it? Who has it? How much of it is there? And how much of it can you extract via taxes, borrowing? How much can you raise to get revenue to finance whatever it is the government is trying to carry out? So I'm going to start with the premise that that is wrong, okay? And I will recognize the grimaces in the audience, that not all of you are with me, maybe yet, but I hope to persuade you to, if you're not already thinking along these lines, that we ought to be thinking along these lines, that there's far greater space available to countries like the US and like the UK in terms of the policy space, the options that are available, the resources that are out there that could be mobilized and put to public use, right, to serve the public good. And that the money piece is what stands in the way. And part of what is attached to the money piece is the idea that deficits are a problem. Okay, so we got the money piece, we have to deal with myths about where the money will come from, how to pay for things, and then we have the deficit piece, the idea that if you don't fully pay for things, that is, if you don't raise enough revenue via taxation and you have to borrow, you're somehow putting the nation at risk. Solvency risks, vulnerabilities with respect to the bond markets, burdening next generations. We all know the stories, right? You've all heard them, am I correct? Yeah, so we're bombarded with this stuff on a daily basis. Everybody tells us this is the reason we can't have nice things, because of the national debt, because of the budget deficit, because of the need to pay for things. So I'm going to do my best in a limited period of time to disabuse us of some of this rhetoric, okay? So this is where we are. This is how we start our thinking. And this is the flaw, right? Right from the beginning, we begin with a flawed premise. And the flawed premise is that somehow the federal government has to play by the same set of rules as you and I. Okay? The government is really just like a giant household, and it must manage its finances in a responsible way, just the way that you and I must manage our finances. So you look at a family budget, and you say, okay, what is it that comes in every month, or on an annual basis? What are the expenses? What's the outgo? And then how do we match the two so that we avoid doing what? Ending up in the red, right? Ending up with deficits. The goal being to adjust your expenditures so you know what the income is. You have a salary. I know what my budget constraint is. It's my income. What can I afford? What car payment can I afford? What is the rent or the mortgage I can afford? How much can I afford for my cable bill? And you go down through the list of expenses and you fit your expenses to the budget. If you can't afford it, it doesn't become one of your expenses. If things get too tight, what do? You borrow, because I'm not giving up my standard of living. I may borrow, or I may say I've got to make cuts, right? So the nanny is a luxury, and I've got to take her down from 5 days a week to 3 days a week, and the housekeeper goes to every other week instead of coming every week, and I trim my expenses where I can, and I can more or less balance my own budget, right? I can manage my expenses, try to avoid going into debt, at least that's the idea, right? Avoid going into debt and build up some kind of savings over time. Accumulate savings, build wealth so that you have a cushion, right, for later on in life. So obviously, this makes perfectly good sense for you and I to behave this way. I don't see any problem with this at all, right? This is rational stuff. What happens, though, when households get frugal? Like, think of austerity at the household level, okay? You're trying to manage your expenses, so you start cutting some of your expenditures, tightening your budget. You know, you don't have a lot of room on the income side. You don't just go up to the boss and say, it's getting a little tight. I was wondering if you could just, bump up my salary a little bit so I have a little more cushion. Not really. You're forced to deal on the spending side. So you start trimming expenditures. And at the individual level, this can work. I can save more by spending less. I can pay down my debt, I can accumulate savings, and for me as an individual, this can work out. Right? The problem is if everyone in the economy attempts to behave this way at the same time. Now, why is it that what's good for the individual is catastrophic for the economy as a whole, if everybody tries to do it? How does it make sense that doing something sensible becomes a disaster if everybody practices that behavior? Keynes called it the paradox of thrift, right? It's a fallacy of composition. It's when we try to apply something that works at the micro level to the macro level. And what happens is this. Capitalism, our market economy, runs on sales. This is the easiest way I have found to describe the way that the economy works. It runs on sales. Okay, the economy as a whole is organized around production for profit. Firms hire workers because they expect that if they hire the worker and incur the costs of paying the wage and benefits of that worker is going to help the firm produce some output, which that firm can turn around and sell for more than the cost of production. That is, that they can turn a profit, right? That's why businesses hire and invest, because they think it will be profitable. So what you have happening in the economy as a whole are loads of firms, in the US millions, here maybe tens and tens of thousands of firms. Basically picture them stocking a giant conveyor belt. Everyone is producing and adding some output for sale, like the goal being, please be a customer on the other end of this, right? I'm producing, I want someone to buy this. So all of this merchandise, the idea is to offload it, to find demand for that output. Households carry most of the weight. They offload most of the product, which is to say that household consumption is most of GDP. Most of the spending that takes place in the economy is done by households. People sometimes think it's government spending, right? Because everyone is always telling me government is so big and such a big part of the economy. Government does a small amount of the total spending. The vast majority is done by the household sector. So households are pulling boxes off of this conveyor belt. They're buying output. But what happens when they decide to tighten their belts? What happens when they decide to spend less in order to try to save more, to be responsible fiscally with their budget? What happens? Some of that stuff doesn't get sold. Okay? Some of that stuff doesn't get sold. So the conveyor belt's going around and now it's carrying more merchandise, And what happens? Firms say, uh-oh, we have a problem. There's no demand for the level of production that I'm currently at. I have to scale back. So I lay off some workers. Right? The rising inventory is the signal to the firm. You're producing too much stuff. Nobody wants this. Right? The demand falls and unemployment goes up. So unemployment rises, firms scale back. This is what happened in the last recession for the US. I don't have a graph that looks exactly like this for the UK, but it would look very similar to this. Okay, so in the old days, and by the old days I mean, post-World War II, capitalist economies all go through business cycles. No nation on earth has ever eliminated the business cycle. We all have booms and they're followed by busts, and then they have another boom and you have a bust, okay? In the old days, we used to have a shorter business cycle. We used to call them V-shaped recoveries because the economy would turn down, but it would recover pretty quickly. And so you would get this V-shaped sort of pattern, the early recessions. But then something starts to change around the 1980s. The recessions begin to stretch out. Look at the 81 recession. And then the 90 recession is the black. And the 2001 recession is the brown. And the last one is the red. We have become more and more U-shaped, and the U's are beginning to look more like L's in the sense that we wonder sometimes whether we're ever going to recover from the downturn. This recession right here, this was 72 months in, that's 6 years, and the US labor market still had not recovered all of the jobs that were lost during the Great Recession. It took us 7 years to claw back from the losses of the Great Recession. So it was a very deep and protracted and bad recession, and part of the reason is that the policy response was too weak. And part of the reason the policy response was too weak was fear of running bigger budget deficits to offset this. Okay, so as consumers pulled back, because consumers had leveraged up, they had borrowed, they had taken on debt, they turned their homes into ATM machines, they started extracting the equity in the home to finance other things, and this drove a tremendous boom in the US economy until it didn't, until things crashed. And when the housing market collapsed, consumption fell. And so the boxes on the conveyor belt started to build up. And so firms started to lay off workers. And that's what happened. We were losing 800,000 jobs a month in the US. I can hardly say it. 800,000 jobs a month, right? So this is the problem. We lost control completely. Now, some people would have said, and some economists actually did say, even during the Great Recession, well, the way out of this is to get the rest of the world to buy the stuff. So if households in the US won't buy stuff, we just have to, we need a weaker dollar. We started to blame China. You heard things like that. The value of the dollar is too high. If we could just get the dollar down, the rest of the world would buy our stuff, and that would help the US economy recover. So let's depend on the rest of the world. That's the kind of stuff you're hearing from Donald Trump now, right? Where he says, look, we have trade deficits. This is a problem. We have to reverse this. We don't want the rest of the world taking advantage of us, right? We've become their piggy bank. This is the kind of language that he's using. The problem is, if you want demand to recover and you want the rest of the world to engineer that recovery, what they're doing is not just helping create the jobs, but they're also taking the stuff. Yes? So when you're producing for export, the other countries get to enjoy the benefits of consuming the stuff that your people produced. So it's your labor time, it's your raw materials, it's your resources that you're using here at home, but then you're sending to the rest of the world to enjoy. So one of the things I think that's being missed in this debate about trade, especially with Donald Trump, is that exports in real terms are a cost to the country that's exporting. Okay? In other words, think about it this way. You could have used your workers, their time, your resources, your raw materials to produce things and keep them domestically and raise the domestic standard of living. Instead, you sent them abroad to raise someone else's standard of living. It's not something you hear people talk about, but I think it's important to keep in mind as we have discussions about trade. So, is there another way? If households, who's that? Okay, so if households aren't taking the boxes off the conveyor belt, and you don't want the rest of the world to take all the boxes away, because then your people don't have boxes to consume and raise standard of living, is there another way to backfill the lost demand? Where else could it come from? And the only other answer here is from the government. That's the only other place it can come from. So I'm asking this question. What if the government commits to maintaining a full employment economy? What would that look like? How would it work? If it commits to balancing conditions in the economy rather than committing to balancing the budget. So what austerity does is austerity says, all right, we're going to force the economy to balance the budget. Yeah? Instead, allow the budget to balance the economy. Yeah? What would that look like? What does a balanced economy look like? Now, we can have political debates about that. For me, I would say an imbalanced economy is one that looks like this, where the concentration of wealth and income is going increasingly into the hands of a smaller and smaller number of people. That's an imbalance. It's an imbalance that's not just morally upsetting. It's an imbalance that causes the economy to malfunction. The economy doesn't function as well if you're shoveling most of the income into the hands of the people who are least likely to turn around and spend it into the economy. That robs you of sales and customers and demand. So it would be far better to rebalance the distribution of wealth and income. A balanced economy doesn't have millions of children living in poverty. A balanced economy doesn't have infrastructure that's crumbling around you. A balanced economy doesn't have seniors who are, on fixed income living in poverty. So imagine, and we can all come up with our own definition of what a balanced economy would look like, but at least if you set the goals as objective, I want to cut the child poverty rate to 0 in 10 years' time. I want to repair every structurally deficient bridge so that it's not structurally deficient in 2 years' time. I want to, mission-oriented, set the goals and allow the budget to help you achieve those objectives. So the budget becomes the tool to carrying out mission-oriented budgeting. No particular budget outcome is more desirable than any other. If it takes a deficit that's equal to 3% of your GDP to balance your economy, okay. So I have a good economy. The kids are healthy, the seniors are well cared for, the infrastructure is fixed, I don't have inflation problem, I've got good conditions. The number that appears on the ledger that gets written down, scrolled down, Downing Street or whatever, who cares? I don't care if it's 3% or 4.5%, maybe it's a surplus of 1%. That number isn't what's important. The goals are what's important, and the budget is just the tool to get you to achieve those goals. So you say, well, wait a minute, Kelton, that sounds nice, right? Pie in the sky and all. But we know that we're broke here, so this is not an option. We can't use the budget to balance the economy because we've already broken the budget, right? So here's the letter from Liam, how do I say the last name? Brian Byrne. He leaves the letter, right, to the incoming Chief Secretary. Dear Chief Secretary, I'm afraid there is no money. Kind regards and good luck, right? Ha ha. Okay, so this is a joke, right? And it is a joke. I mean, it is a joke, but it isn't a one-off joke. It's a redundant, recurring theme, and it becomes not a joke, but it becomes something that the population begins to believe, right? And then we all subscribe to it, and then we don't want to believe that we've got a government that's broke. I mean, that's not good, and as good patriotic citizens, we want to make sure that we fix that, and so we'll make the sacrifices. So in the US, the language during the 2000s was about shared sacrifice, right? It was about all of us together cutting back and tightening our belts. We're in this together for the good of the country, right? To save our national solvency. And so, that goes way, way back in time. There is no public money, she told us. There is only taxpayer money. This is a really important line. There is no public money. Right away, that says you have to find the money, but you're not going to find it from the public, right? You're not going to find it from the public sector. You're not going to find it in government. You have to find it outside of government. So who has the money? Where is the money? It's taxpayer money. The taxpayer must pay for whatever it is, okay? What is behind this thinking? Behind this thinking is the idea that the government is constrained like a household or a private business. It has to arrange financing. If I want to go buy a new automobile, I show up at the dealer's car lot and I say, I like that one. Now, he doesn't let me drive away in the car until I do what? Pay for it. I have to show that I've got the financing. So I have to arrange the financing. I have to borrow the money. I have to show that, okay, here's where the money's coming from. Okay, so we think that the government is like a household or a business, that it prearranges its financing, and then it goes out and it does some spending, all right? We think the government, just like a household, can spend more than it collects, but only for a period of time, and only if it can find money from someone who got it, and they can borrow it. Okay, you've got to borrow the money from someone who has it. You've got to go out and get it. You need other people's money in order to be able to spend. The problem is, money is an object. It's finite. There's only so much of it. There's a pile of pounds in the world, somewhere in a corner, And it's massive, but there's only so much of it. And everybody who wants a piece of it, private industry, the government, household, everyone who wants to borrow money has to go to that finite pile of pounds and compete for it. The more intense the competition, what? The higher the price goes. So the interest rate. So if government wants to borrow more money, they're competing with private industry. That drives up the price of money. So interest rates go up. Now what happens? Higher interest rates crowd out the far more efficient private sector spending. And so investment goes down. So now we're scolded for government trying to do anything because it comes at the expense of private industry, which, as we all know, is far more efficient than government at doing everything, right? So this is the story. You got to find the money. There's only so much of it. The more you try to borrow, the less it leaves for someone else. Next thing you know, you've borrowed too much, right? There's a fine line between being solvent and insolvent. We've all seen people, probably, who go broke. A household takes on too much debt, has bills they can't pay, right? They start missing payments. The bill collector comes. All of a sudden, their credit gets downgraded. We've seen businesses go under. Too much debt, right? Businesses fail. So we see the debt grow. We see creditors begin to worry. All of a sudden, your credit score goes down. We think, well, that same thing would happen to a government. Just like when my credit score goes down, your credit rating goes down. If you get downgraded by Moody's or Fitch or Standard & Poor's, then it's going to cost you more to borrow next time. So now you're becoming even more insolvent, right? It's harder and harder to pay your bills. And we all know what happens. You end up like Greece. And I'm here to tell you that during the debt crisis, in the depths, I shouldn't say during, sort of a rolling debt crisis in the Eurozone, but during the depths of the crisis, 2010-ish, I would turn on the television in my kitchen at night, and Tom Brokaw, one of our leading commentators, news people, would come on, and the music in the background would go like this. Dun, dun, dun. And then he would say, the debt crisis in America, and the program would begin. And I'm like, wait, what? Debt crisis in America did we just have? How did we get a debt crisis in America? But he started off telling viewers the debt crisis in America. And then in the backdrop was Greece. So the lesson to the American people was, this is you if you don't get your fiscal house in order, right? We were running big budget deficits because the economy had collapsed, and we were told every day, day in and day out, that we had a debt problem, that we were going to end up like the Greeks, okay? So behind it, in the backdrop, all of us are bombarded with these memes. Household government like a household government, right? So tighten your belts, everybody, please. We're approaching Great Britain. So these are the household memes. When you read or when you hear your politicians say, we must live within our means, right? We have to watch our budget. We must tighten our belts. We are running up the credit card. Going into debt is not the answer, right? We're going broke. Those are all, that's language that applies to a household or to a private business, but not one that is applicable to a government like the United States or like Britain. Okay, so why? I love Twain, so I quote Twain pretty often. So here's Mark Twain, right? It ain't what you know that gets you into trouble, it's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Okay, so what is it that we know for sure that just ain't so? I have lots of things that I normally use to get the audience warmed up to this idea, but because I have a time constraint, I'm only going to present one, and it didn't require audio, so I went with this one. Look, this is the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank, so I think we can trust the St. Louis Fed. Can we agree that the Fed is not a partisan, liberal, hack organization? This is the St. Louis Federal Reserve, and what they're telling us here in research published by the St. Louis Fed is that as the sole manufacturer of dollars, whose debt is denominated in dollars, the US government can never become insolvent. So let's pause. We won't even read the rest. As the sole manufacturer, what is the word that we use in everyday language when there's one maker, one manufacturer of something? What do we call it? A monopolist. A monopolist. So who's played this game? Everybody's played this game, right? Or seen this game played or knows what this game is. So when you play the game of Monopoly, and you open up the instructions. I hate this game, it never ends, right? But when you play this game, you open up the instructions, and what is the first thing you do? Very good. You choose someone whom you trust, to control the currency, to issue the money. Okay, most of the time the audience says you fight over the dog and the shoe and whatever. I say, okay, fair enough. But the second thing you do is you pick someone to be the banker. So you figure out who's going to issue the money in this game. Okay? So imagine that you take the board out and you set up all the pieces and somebody says, okay, before we get the game going, I'm going to need all the players to pay their taxes. So you have to fund me, right? Would the game ever begin? No, it's silly. You can't even start the game. The first thing that has to happen is that somebody has to spend the currency into the game, or the game can't begin. So somebody provides an allocation. You get 2 500s, you get this many 100s, and now the players are ready to play. Okay, now there's money. What happens? You roll the dice, you go around. If you get lucky, you land on the chance, and you draw the card, and it says, you got lucky, you got paid $50. Ooh, okay, so I get a payment, right? Maybe it's my Social Security, maybe it's some other form of government payment, but here comes money. Then I keep going, and all of a sudden I draw a card and it says, IRS, pay your taxes. Yeah. So 100 leaves the game. Okay, so 100 is paid in taxes. That goes out of the game. Now I'm trying to get by. I'm trying to buy things as I go around the board. If I make it all the way around, they top me up. I get 200 for pass and go, right? When does the game end? The game ends when more has been collected out than has been paid back in. Yeah? As long as the person who's in charge of the money is putting more into the game than they're taking out, the game proceeds. Problems arise as soon as someone starts taxing out of the game too much and not replacing it with enough. Now the balances of all the players goes down, and pretty soon you have nobody left to play the game. Okay, so this game illustrates something important about being the monopolist, being the issuer. In fact, the rules of the game say that in the event that the game goes on so long that you run out of money to pay in, that you write an IOU. And this is in the instructions of the game, okay? And you keep the game going. Why? Because money is no object, right? It's just a ledger. It's a spreadsheet entry. It's a ledger entry. So you continue the game. All right, so this is a pretty good illustration, I think, of how public money works in a country like the US, in a country like the UK. Sadly, the rest of us, we don't have this capacity. We aren't issuers of currency. We're merely the users of the currency. So everybody here is a user of pounds, I assume, unless you've traveled from elsewhere. I'm a user of the US dollar, but I don't issue it, unfortunately. I do not have the power of the public purse. It puts me in a different relationship. It means that language that makes perfectly good sense to apply to me, going broke, running out of money, needing to tighten my belt, right, all that kind of stuff, perfectly sensible when applied to me, but nonsensical when applied to the issuer of the currency. Okay, so money is no object for certain governments. I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. Most governments tell you what the unit of account is, how they're going to spend, in what currency they're going to spend, in what currency they're going to collect taxes, and in what currency they're going to borrow. The government decides this. In the US, the government has decided the unit of account is called the dollar, right? The government spends, taxes, and borrows in US dollars. In Britain, the unit of account is the pound. The British pound comes from where? The British government, and it can't come from anywhere else. In the US, the dollar comes from the US government, and it can't legally come from anywhere else. If I get caught trying to manufacture dollars in my garage, it's called counterfeiting, and I go to jail, right? I can't do it. The government has given unto itself the exclusive right to issue the currency. No one else, not China, not anybody else, can issue the US dollar. Only the US government can issue the currency. In Britain, only the British government can issue the pound. In Japan, only the Japanese government can issue the yen. One nation, one money. That's how it works in most of the world, okay? Most nations require that taxes be paid in a currency that the state has the exclusive power to issue. So my taxes in the US are due in US dollars. I can't pay my taxes in any other currency, and I can't get the currency from anywhere other than the US government. We call this sovereign money. So the US, Japan, the UK, they have sovereign money. okay? Governments spend in these countries by instructing their banks, their central banks, to change the numbers in someone's account upward. So you sell goods to the government, your account gets credited with US dollars. Where did the money come from? It didn't come from anywhere. It came from the keyboard at the New York Federal Reserve Bank, which is putting the entries into your account because the government said, I bought from him, go credit his account. So Boeing or Lockheed or whomever gets a credit to their account. They're not literally printing money and taking it over to your bank. They're not literally taking money from the pile that exists in the world or from someone else's account and transferring. They're creating it. They're spending it into existence. We say taxes drive money. As long as the state retains the power to both make and enforce its tax laws, the people need the government's money. See, we've thought of this the wrong way around. When Margaret Thatcher said there is no public money, there is only taxpayer money, she's wrong, okay? It's not they who need our money, it's we who need their money. Okay? We need their money in order to settle our obligations to the state. They are taxing us in pounds. You have to get the pound. Where do you get the pound? From the British government, right? So we've just flipped this thing around and convinced ourselves that they need our money instead of the other way around. The currency itself gets its value by virtue of the fact that the government demands that we all make payments to government in a currency that they and only they can create. That gives the currency value. It allows the government to move resources from the private sector into the public domain. And here I'll tell a quick story. How's my time, by the way? Oh, you're so interested you forgot to watch the clock. Good for you. Good for you. How many? 50 more minutes. Oh, for the whole session? Oh, well, I should speed up a bit, but I'm not going to. So Britain used to understand this. In fact, we learned from you. Okay, I'm married to a historian, so if the history is not perfect, I don't even have an excuse. I should get it really right, but I'm going to give you the thumbnail version of the history here. Okay, when Britain colonized Africa, what happened? They sail over, hop off the boat, I'm taking some liberties, have a look around and say, gee, there are some really interesting things here that we don't have back home. We sure would like to have some of them. How's about we buy them from you, right? Offering up British pounds in payment. And the Africans said what? Cheerio, safe trip home. No, thank you. Right? Why would we want to give up our resources? Why would we hand our stuff over to you in exchange for this paper? Well, lovely. I mean, the Queen looks lovely and all, but we're really not interested in this swap. So what did Britain do? I don't think you understand. See, what we're setting up here is a colony, and you're going to need to make payment to the Crown, okay? And the payments will be due in British pounds. Oh dear, we don't have any British pounds. How can we pay the tax to the Crown? We can help you with that. We can help you with that. All you have to do is sell us some of this cool stuff we were admiring. We'll pay you, and now you'll have the currency to settle your obligation to the Crown. See how easy it is to monetize an economy that wasn't previously using money? The tax gets value, didn't have any value at first, gets its value by virtue of the fact that you now need it to keep your head, right? So these are the benefits of retaining your sovereign money. The government can never go broke. It doesn't make sense to use that language. It can afford to buy whatever is for sale in the domestic unit of account. So whatever people are trying to sell in order to get pounds is theoretically the limit to what the British government can afford. What is for sale in pounds? Okay? It doesn't need to borrow its own currency, and it can always set the interest rate that it chooses to pay on any money that it does borrow, because borrowing is an option. Okay? I almost brought my props, but I knew I wouldn't have time. This gives a country additional policy space. It allows you to run better fiscal policy to manage your economy. Okay, what happened in the Eurozone? Complete and utter mess in terms of what they did to their monetary system. These countries abandoned their sovereign currencies. Okay, they said, I'm giving up the drachma, I'm giving up the lira, I'm giving up the franc, and I'm going to start using this foreign currency called the euro. Notice, British pound, US dollar, Japanese yen, something euro. You don't even know what to put in front of that because it's not one nation, one money anymore. It's one market, one money. And the euro was created around a completely different philosophy, that one market needs one money rather than one nation needs one money. Okay, so the currency is divorced from the nation state, making the euro itself basically like a foreign currency. These countries have to actually go out and find the money in order to spend. They really are revenue constrained. They really are subject to the whims of the bond market, and they have to pay market interest rates. Completely different animal here. Okay, they lack the kind of power that a sovereign currency issuer like the UK or the US has. This is a quote from an economist who was a contemporary of John Maynard Keynes. His name was Abba Lerner. I'm a big fan of much of his work. He says here, by virtue of the power, because a country has the power to create and destroy money by fiat and take money away from people by taxation, it puts the government in a position to keep the spending in the economy at a level necessary to maintain full employment. In other words, if you have your own currency, you can have a good economy. This is what Lerner is saying here. Now, suppose you want to build a good society. John Kenneth Galbraith wrote a book and called it The Good Society. Okay, what would that look like? What would a good society look like? And the first question everyone will want to know is, but how will you pay for your good society? Okay, so now, with apologies to his brother, who's with us, I won't point him out in case he doesn't want it known. They did ask me to draw on some experience, so I'm going to do a little bit of this. And I think you're with me. I don't think I'm losing my audience, so if it's okay, I'm going to keep going until I'm finished, and we'll use whatever Q&A time is left. So I worked for Senator Sanders on the Budget Committee, and then I advised the campaign. And so I got a little bit of a flavor of what it was like to be in his situation and responding always to press questions and to his political opponents and so forth with these kinds of questions. So here's a guy who had an ambitious agenda, right? Wanted to do lots of big things. Hillary Clinton, the main contender in the race, challenged him on education, on infrastructure. Wherever she came in, he came in bigger, right? And so she writes about this in her book where, it comes out after the race is all over. And she says, oh, it was so frustrating because every time we tried to do something bold, he went bigger. And she said, and she's having an email exchange with someone, and that part becomes part of the book. And this someone emails back to her, and he says, I assume it's a he says, it's like Bernie says, I think America should get a pony. And Hillary, the sensible, rational, right, fiscally responsible candidate says, how will you pay for the pony? So he's depicted as this pie in the sky agenda, completely unaffordable, not right? Right, that's the depiction. Puppies and rainbows and unicorns. My position is this is a trap. So this is the way that Hillary Clinton approached policymaking. She said you cannot cut taxes or increase spending unless you can pay for it. Okay, unless you can pay for it. What she's saying here is one must not add to the deficit. Everything must be deficit neutral, fully offset. If you're going to put 100 in, you either need to take 100 out in taxes or cut 100 out of some other part of the budget. You must not disturb the deficit, right? This is her position. I'm arguing that is a trap. It traps us, it limits our policy choices, and it leaves us with an economy that is operating far below its means. We're not living anywhere near our means. Okay, so if you get trapped in this, though, where everybody is demanding that you show your work, and that's what they did in the race, show your work. How are you going to pay for everything? So he says, I want $1 trillion of infrastructure. How will you pay for it? He says, I want to make public colleges and universities tuition free. How will you pay for it? He says, I want Medicare for all. How will you pay for it? And so if you're bound by those rules, then you have to show where the money will come from. And so he did. And what he did was say, look, if I have to find the money, then I have to go where the money is. And where is the money? The rich people have all the money, right? The rich people have all the money. So we end up going after Amazon, Bezos, and Walmart, and the Koch brothers. And don't get me wrong, we should go after them, okay? But it becomes a magnet because that's where the money is. So it's the lure. We go there because that's where the money is. I want to make public colleges and universities tuition free. How will you pay for it? Wall Street will pay for it. Okay, we'll put a tax on, he said, Wall Street speculation or financial transactions tax. We'll raise the money, we'll pay for everything, right? So it becomes this sort of a thing. So now the question is, okay, so if you want a really bold agenda, then these are the rules that we currently play by. You have to find the money. Who's got the money? Rich people have the money. So you go get the money from the rich people, from wealthy, from Wall Street, and you tax the money, and that gives you the revenue that you need in order to redistribute, fund programs, help the poor, right, the elderly, whatever the case may be. So what it does is it forces you to have two policy fights. You don't just have to fight to make public colleges and universities tuition free and fight for that agenda on its merits. You also have to fight to raise taxes on Wall Street, or also have to fight, you see what I'm saying? It sets up simultaneously two battles, right? Because you haven't decoupled the spending from the revenue. So you have to both win on the revenue side in order to win on the spending side. So if you say, we're going to fix crumbling infrastructure and feed hungry kids, the answer is, yeah, if you can find the money. But unless and until you can, you're not fixing anything and you're not feeding nobody, right? Because you haven't found the money. So in a sense, it's cruel, right? Because it holds hostage hungry people, sick people, suffering people, poor people are held hostage while you try to pick some money off of the wealthy. And unless and until you win on that, you can't take care of business, building a good society. Okay, so I find it frustrating. Okay, here's what is the purpose of a tax. I'm going to move as quickly as I can through the rest of this. This is from a paper that was published in 1946. And it was published by a guy named Beardsley Rummel, who was the head of the New York Federal Reserve Bank, head of the New York Fed, so no slouch, okay? And what he does is he writes an article and he titles it, Taxes for Revenue Are Obsolete. Taxes for revenue? What the hell else are taxes for if they're not for revenue, right? And he says, nope, obsolete. Why did he say that? He tells you right here in this passage, the necessity for government to tax in order to maintain its independence and solvency is true for state and local governments, but it is not true for the national government. Two things have happened which have changed the rules of the game. One, we got a central bank and we know how to use it. Two, we went off the gold standard. There it is right there. You're no longer on a gold standard. If you're on a gold standard, finding the money is a real thing. You literally had to dig in the ground, in the mines, to find the money, right? And he's saying we suspended the gold standard to go to war so that we would have the fiscal capacity to spend whatever is necessary to win the war. And that's exactly what happened. The financing was not constrained by revenue. Government ramped up deficit spending, held interest rates down by telling the central bank exactly where it wanted interest rates pegged, and the deficits were run. Nothing bad happened. We won the war, and the American economy prospered for decades after that. Okay? So he says, look, we don't collect taxes because we need the money. Obviously, we're the sole manufacturer of the currency. Why would we tax to get it? We create it. We issue it. Okay, so taxes do other stuff. They allow the government to spend money into the economy without inflating the economy, without causing inflation. If I want to spend $1 trillion into the economy on infrastructure and I say, I don't need the revenue, so I'm not going to tax anything out, holy moly, you might get an inflation problem just spending $1 trillion in. So the question becomes, how much can you safely spend to mobilize resources that are currently unused, right? Unemployment. You have construction workers, architects, engineers, you have steel, you have concrete, you have machinery that's not being used by anyone in the economy. So you're not going to crowd it out. You say, aha, I'm going to spend hiring these construction workers, that engineer, that architect. I'm going to take these machines that move heavy stuff and make concrete. I'm going to hire all these things, and I'm going to spend on that. And if I try to do too much, I'm going to get an inflation problem. So I'm going to have to pull some income out of the economy, tax some money out in order to guard against the risk of inflation. So taxes do that. Taxes are important because they help redistribute income. They take income away from people if you think they have too much. So taxes play an important role there. They incentivize or disincentivize behaviors. You might provide tax incentives to encourage people to drive electric cars, or to discourage people from smoking or eating too much sugar or whatever. So taxes do important things, but Rummel's point was you don't need them in order to raise revenue. That's not what they do. Okay, so go back to this picture. And now look at it from this vantage point. We're going to take from the Waltons, from Jeff Bezos, and from the Koch brothers, not because we're desperate for their cash in order to care for our people, but because they have too damn much cash. You do it because it's that degree of inequality is bad for democracy, it's bad for the functioning of the economy, not because you're helpless at caring for the people in your nation without their help. You don't need them. You can go around them. You don't have to go through them. But you do it because you want to rebalance the distribution of income. You want a balanced economy. Go here. I want to make public colleges and universities tuition free. I'm not going to tax Wall Street because I need their money to pay the tuition. I'm going to tax Wall Street because I want to disincentivize Wall Street speculation. And if I'm successful, what happens to Wall Street speculation? If my tax is successful, it goes down. People do less of it, right? People say, oh, they put a sin tax on speculation, so I'm going to do less of it. Now, you don't want to say that my revenue to pay for free college is dependent upon something that I abhor, which is Wall Street speculation. So you could say we're going to do a financial transactions tax because we think there's too much speculative behavior, and it creates bubbling economies, and it creates financial instability, and so forth, right? So you could rethink the way that you talk about taxes. So my position is, when we think of government budgeting, we have it completely backwards. I'm going to do this quickly because I've already said it many times. We think taxing and borrowing come first. That's first order. The government says, okay, I'm going to put together a budget, but before I do, I'm going to see how much revenue I can raise. So I'm going to raise taxes, I'm going to collect, now I'm going to borrow, so I'm going to get some more pounds. Now I have money, and now I can spend. So who's going to pay the tab becomes the question. Who's going to pick up the tab? How will you pay for it? You need taxes and you got to borrow before you can do anything. Nope, it's the other way around. Government, think of monopoly game. Government has to spend the currency into the economy before anyone can have it. And once it's spent into the economy, people now have some to return in payment of taxes, and they have some to swap out to get bonds, which are interest-bearing and kind of cool because they're super safe investment vehicle that you can own if you want to give up some of your currency in exchange for a bond. But the spending has to come first. Just like when Britain colonized Africa. You couldn't collect the tax until the government first spent the pounds into the economy, okay? So it muddles the debate. What we do muddles the debate. This thinking right here from a newspaper just 2 days ago, I think. She says, oh, we face a dilemma because, you know, we have this crisis, we want to take care of health care, and we have three choices. We can either raise taxes, raise the revenue, slash spending, okay, austerity, cuts to other programs to free up some money, or break our spending rules. Guess which one I'm in favor of, right? There's one here that makes a lot more sense than the other two from my perspective. So you just put the handcuffs on. You tie your shoes together and complain you can't run. So bend over, untie your shoes, and go run around. And that's basically what has to happen here. You've committed to austerity, you've committed to budget rules, you've committed to trying to force the economy to balance the budget instead of allowing the budget to balance the economy. And so if you don't want to disregard your rules, then these are your only two choices, right? You're going to increase taxes or you're going to slash government programs in order to try to sustain something instead of keeping your eye on what really matters. And here is the last, I think, slide. And what I'm going to try to do is, you know, bring it all together and say we're too stuck on the money question, we're too stuck on the financing, We're too stuck on the how will you pay for it in money terms. What matters is the real stuff in our economy. What matters are the resources, the real resources that are at our disposal. So if you have millions of people who are unemployed, factories operating far below their capacity, resources available to be mobilized, then the government can do what Mariana said. It can say, what should the mission be? We have all of these things lying around. The market is not bidding for them. There is a zero bid for unemployed labor. Yeah? The price of unemployed labor is zero. There's no bid. So if I'm looking out at the vast resources that are available to me, and I say, what could we be doing with the riches that we have? Then you focus on the real things. And now you have a tough choice to make because you have to prioritize. Should we do infrastructure? Should we do childcare? Should we do healthcare? Should we have competing alternative uses for all of the available resources that you have? But the money pushes those resources into their productive uses, right? But remember, the government can afford to buy whatever is for sale in British pounds. So if you have people unemployed, unemployment is evidence of people looking for what? Paid work, okay? So you can put those people to work. So in the US right now, Senator Sanders and others, including I think most of the people that we think would probably be running for president in 2020, including Senator Cory Booker and Kirsten Gillibrand, they're House members, and they're all putting forward legislation around trying to create good jobs. Good jobs, meaning high-paying jobs. So in the case of Senator Sanders, as is his norm, he's going bigger than everybody else. And so he's announced that he's going to be putting forward legislation to introduce a federal job guarantee program, which is basically a public option in the labor market, which says if you're unemployed and you would like to be working, we will find a job for you. Okay? It will be a federally funded program, but it will be locally administered. So the idea is that local communities will have a say in the type of work that gets done. So, imagine Britain and think of all of the communities where there are pockets of high unemployment. And you were to go into those communities and say, what would you have people do if somebody provided you with workers to do things? Would you want community gardens? Would you want to deal with climate issues or soil erosions? Does your library need new bookshelves? How about your elder care facilities? Are there enough staff there to hold hands, talk to, read to, play checkers with? What does a good society look like to you in the community? You propose projects, and the projects go up through the chain of approval, and if they're approved, they get federally funded. Right? And so you can imagine what kinds of opportunities would be available if we let go of the how will you pay for it, where will the money come from question, and focused on what really matters, right? The resources that we have at our disposal and how best to put them to use to serve the public good. Yeah? Is that okay? What do I need to do? Oh, yeah, sure. Do you want me to just? Yeah, sure.
My name's Deborah. Two things. I'm an NHS campaigner, so campaigning for the National Health Service, which you referred to there in one of your slides. And I was looking at the last slide about have we lost sight of things, and looking at the title, Rethinking How Public Value is Created. And I was wondering whether in the UK, whether it shouldn't be more rediscovering how public value is created, because we created a welfare state and national health service after the Second World War, which was at a time of absolute devastation and poverty and absolute need in the country. And the government did precisely what you're talking about now. It spent, and Bevan, who actually was Aaron Bevan, who was the creator of the NHS. He said something when he resigned that I think will really resonate with you about what you're talking about, because he resigned because they were bringing charges into the NHS and he wanted it to be entirely free. He said the country could afford for it to be entirely free. And the argument that took place in the Cabinet Office was about spending on defence. And he said there was nothing to buy. that everything had gone, the precious metals, everything that they needed, all the special chemicals they needed to make the arms, they'd been used up in the war. And that America, which was very powerful because it had sent a lot of its real resources to the rest of the world during the war, and the rest of the world were now having to send it back again to America. He said, there isn't anything to buy there. He said, why would you give them the defence budget money when there's nothing for them to buy, when we've got people who are sick all over the place who really do need the money? And when Theresa May makes those three choices and she says we have to either increase the taxes, which impoverishes people, actually literally takes money out of their pocket, or we can cut the other services which have already been cut to the core, or we can deficit spend. Deficit spend is the only one that doesn't harm or kill people.
Not only that, it improves things. So let me do this. I was going to mention I was going to bring my props, and I ended up not doing it because we would have gone an extra 15 minutes, but very quickly. Most of the audiences that I talk to are in the financial community. For whatever reason, I end up talking to lots and lots of people who are financial advisors, financial planners, and there will be rooms with 400 or 800 or 1,400 people. And these are people who work in finance, so you would expect that they would, know something about money and finance, and yet I go in and you talk to them about the government's, but now let me remind you, they tell all their clients, spend less than you earn, save, and pay down your debt. That's the advice to every one of their clients. And it's perfectly rational advice. So they come into that with that mindset, and they believe the federal government, like everybody else, should play by that set of rules. Then I do a little exercise with them, and I say, okay, let's find out whether you understand the deficit and the national debt. So you would think that they would, because again, they work with money and finance. They don't have a clue. They hate it and they're mad at the deficit until I get done with them. And so here's what I do. I go in and I say, okay, I'll play the role of the government. And so I have my basically monopoly money, but it has my picture on it. And so they're Kelton bucks, right? So I'm the government, so I'm going to spend some money into the economy. You're all in the private sector of my economy, businesses, households. And so I'm going to spend 10 into the economy. So I hand someone 10. Now they have 10, right? And I say, but I'm going to collect taxes now. So I'm going to tax back 7. So they hand me back 7. And I say, what did I do? I ran a deficit. So I go and I scroll it down, -3, government of Kelton. So now you're supposed to be very angry at me because I did this irresponsible thing called running a budget deficit. My -3, how mad are you? You're sitting there holding 3. Where'd you get it? You got it from me. And you wouldn't have that 3 if I hadn't put in more than I took out. So now they're thinking, And I say, but wait, let's do it the proper way. Let's balance the budget. So give me the money back. We'll do it again. So I spend 10 in. I tax 10 out. Now I've balanced my budget. I go right down. Balanced budget, smiley face. Everybody is supposed to be happy. Are you happy? No, I missed my 3, right? I missed my 3. So I say, well, okay, hang on. Let's go do it the Clinton way, because this is what really excites the Democrats, right? Those Clinton surpluses. So but now, you have a problem, because in order for me to run a surplus, I have to collect more from you than I put back into the economy. So taxes have to be higher than government spending. So now you see yourself going into the red so that I can go into the black. So you have the deficit, I have the surplus. How do you feel? And they go, miserable, right? Give me back my deficit. So the point is, people don't have the foggiest idea. And then you do the national debt. What is the national debt? I spend 10 into the economy. I tax 7 out. You're holding 3 Kelton dollars. I hold up 3 treasuries. I also have them laminated with my picture. And these are treasuries, right? And I say, who would like to buy these 3 Kelton treasury bonds? And sure enough, the person in the audience who's got the 3 Kelton dollars that don't pay any interest would like to swap them for the treasuries, which pay interest. Now you feel even happier, because not only did I give you money, I'm subsidizing your savings with free interest money, right? Which is what's happening when the government borrows. The money to buy the bonds comes from the deficit spending itself. So you're not even out anything. You're up, your wealth is up, your income is up. The problem is with the distribution, because who holds those treasuries? They're not equitably distributed across the economy. They're mostly concentrated in the hands of the wealthy, who can afford to save and put money into investment vehicles like treasuries and so forth. So it isn't that the national debt is a bad thing, it's your asset. My liability, it's your asset, right? And you're getting a risk-free asset, and I'm paying you to have it. We could talk about why I do that. Oh, I don't like to be the one to take the questions.
No, you can. Do you want to take the microphone? Just pass it on to you.
I'll give shorter answers so everybody can.
Hi, Stephanie. My name is Tomas. I'm second-year PhD student at the IIPP at UCL.
Great.
And one of the main interests, I mean, especially for when it comes to my research, is about monitoring the financial system. So I know a bit about the MMT, which is the main school of thought that comes from the US. And I was wondering whether you could comment on the outcome of a referendum that was held in Switzerland a couple of days ago, in which the citizens were asked to outstrip the private banking sector from the power of creating money, well, a special kind of money, which is not government money, because especially this somehow shows that in the current financial system, there's not just government money or public money, but there's different sorts of money or cash or financial liabilities, if you want. So, and I would say there's a hierarchy of money, which is both at the national and the international level, because if we look at money across nations, we can see the US dollar having a different role from, I don't know, the Japanese yen or the euro. And so how would you imagine a financial system different from the current one? Maybe a sort of financial system that actually is aligned with the public interest in a democratic society.
Okay, let me, because you are a PhD student, I will give you assignments. Rather than, it's a big question, and we could have a long conversation over a drink about it, but instead I'll say two things. I don't know the outcome of the referendum. Good. That would have been, I was tweeting about it. I'm sure that had something to do with its failure. No, people here in the UK, like Ann Pettifor and Francis Coppola, were also weighing in, also taking the position that I took as well. People are doing crazy things, I think, because they try to diagnose the problem, and they see that private banks were somehow involved in creating credit that somehow drove the housing bubble that ended up collapsing the economy, and therefore, working backwards, the way to stop something like this from happening again is to strip private banks of the ability to make loans that create deposits. Okay, this is not my position. So you asked how I would go about restructuring the financial system to make it safer and that sort of thing. There's a very good outline, and it's quite detailed, and it was written by Warren Mosler. It's published at Huffington Post. It's a proposal to reform the banking system, is I think what it's called. And we worked on it together as a group, so you should look at that. Because it's not a short answer. Lots needs to be done.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your presentation. My question is, do you have to be a globally powerful sovereign currency for your argument to hold? The examples that you used with the US and the UK, obviously a lot of investment is needed in infrastructure in developing countries in the global south. How much of what you presented would you have to change?
Yeah, great question.
If you were to be talking about different kinds of countries?
Great question. So keep in mind two key points. One is that the government is spending, borrowing, taxing only in its own currency. So if you've got countries like Ecuador or Argentina with its messed up system where so much is US dollar denominated, those countries are not going to be able to exercise the fiscal capacities. But what about, do you have to be a country like the US or the UK or Japan in order to do this? The answer is no. What you have to, and remember I said the limit, the upper limit is what is for sale in your currency. So, India has an employer of last resort program, or I don't know a lot about it, but, and you could, I'm sure, talk to me a lot about, and I'd love to hear that. But look, if you are a country that has a sovereign currency, even if you're a small open economy, you can say, what are the resources that are available here domestically? And if they're for sale, I can mobilize them, I can buy them. If there's labor that's unemployed that wants to work for my currency, I can hire it, I can put it to work. That doesn't mean that I can have access to the rest of the world's resources that are not available domestically, raw materials and things like that. I'm gonna have to trade for those. I'm gonna have to get the other country's currency if they won't accept mine. So there are some limits, but the limit is what's for sale in your own currency. You can do a lot with that. Okay.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that, Stephanie.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention, though, you brought up the game of Monopoly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether you used it as the monopolisation of the creation of money, but I don't know you're aware, it was actually intended to demonstrate the monopoly of land. It was actually called the Land Lakes game.
Yes.
But also, just to pick up, because we come from the land value taxation sort of movement, and we're very interested in the MMT sort of combination. But you did mention about taxation. I mean, the big thing, of course, you know, is actually repricing. The land market is totally dysfunctional.
Yep.
And so that is one of the important taxes that has to be.
Do you know the work of Michael Hudson? Of course
Yes,
you do.
of course.
Of course. So I was just with Michael. We did a panel together last week in New York City. And so we've done dog and pony shows in the past. So there's a nice complement to the MMT and the Georgia School. And of course, you have a perfectly rational justification for putting up taxes in order to address problems associated with land value overvaluation. Yeah, perfectly compatible.
I think we're going to take 3 questions now. Do you want a pen and paper to write them down, or will you remember?
Oh, I won't remember even one.
That's called the gin and tonic effect.
That's water. That's
Pretending that was
water.
It's gin and tonic. Here you go.
Presentation. Thank you very much. My name is Peter. I noticed there showing the slides with Bernie Sanders now. You would advise on Bernie Sanders, but the slides you showed him, in effect, as it were, the thought came to me, not following your advice. So I'm kind of quite interested in the arguments that are put by people who don't follow your theory, not so much from within their own theory, as it were, but within your own theory. Because it seems to me that that's where we'd need to get to in terms of the political acceptability and viability of the theory sort of playing out in the US and in the UK. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Patricia from the Gower Institute. I'm originally from South America. A lot of countries over there have borrowed over the years from the IMF in dollars. Right now, Argentina is doing that. I believe this country also has some history with borrowing from the IMF. Is there ever a good idea to do that? Is it ever necessary to do that?
Well, it's not. Oh, right.
Anthony Malloy from the Labour Land Campaign. Stephanie, at the beginning you talked about demand and supply, and later on you talked about socially beneficial government deficit spending. Like, how do you mix those two? Like, I mean, presumably you're advocating a job guarantee rather than a universal basic income, because the former stimulates supply as well as demand. Is that the right way of looking at it?
Okay. Peter. So I think the tide is shifting. So his question, to remind, was my advice disregarded? Because Senator Sanders attempted to pay for everything, right? To be fair, I started working for him in January, and he announced that he was going to run in April or May. So it takes a while to warm up to me. You know, what I said is real. You are bound by the rules of Washington. And imagine how much less serious he would have appeared, I think, had he not attempted to dialogue the way that other candidates dialogue. I will point out, however, that he likes to say this phrase: change doesn't come from the top down. Change comes from where? The bottom up. So what I do is I try very hard to go into communities, to give public talks, to get myself out there in social media and to communicate with regular people, because I think that's the pressure point. I really do believe that our politicians will be more likely to let go of some of that rhetoric when we stop holding their feet to the fire every time they show up for a town hall meeting and we're asking them about the deficit. They think, well, I ought to pay attention to the deficit because all of my constituents are asking me about. So let's stop doing that. Let's make sure that we tell them that we want them to unleash the full force of the public purse to serve our interests, because the Republicans just demonstrated that they have no qualms whatsoever adding to the deficit if it means achieving their goals. And their goals are cutting corporate taxes and giving big tax breaks to the donor class. That's their agenda. They're laser focused, and they're not about to let the deficit stand in their way. They'll run right through the deficit, and they say, oh, it'll pay for itself. Hand wave, I'm going there. And Democrats are going, I have to pay for everything. I have to find a way. No, you don't. They just gave you the freedom to now, right, open up. And so there's an interesting senator. His name is Brian Schatz. He's a senator from Hawaii. And he's got legislation out right now for debt-free college. So it's very similar to what Senator Sanders was trying to do with public colleges and universities. And he goes and he sits down for an interview. And they said to him, debt-free college, huh? How are you going to pay for it? And you know what he said? I'm not going to answer that question. He said, it's a trap. It's a trap. He said, the Republicans don't pay for anything. He said, why is it only progressive? Only the progressive agenda has to be paid for. I thought it was brilliant. And what you're seeing is, I'm hearing from House members and from Senate staffers that the conversations are changing. In the background, they're all trying to figure, they write to me, and I'm talking with at least 20 candidates who are running right now across the country for the House and Senate, mostly for the House, who are calling to say, how do I talk about the deficit? How do I avoid this kind of stuff? So I think we're getting there. I just think that really it's going to take more of us giving them the space that they can then say, okay, you're not going to primary me and hold me accountable if I don't. Patricia, IMF. Huh. Does it ever make sense to borrow from the IMF? Not if you can help it. Not if you can help it, because those IMF loans come with strings attached, and the strings, well, they're designed to hang you. So but sometimes a country has debt. So the choice is, do I default on this foreign denominated debt? I'm Russia. I'm Argentina, right? I borrowed US dollars. So now my commitment is to repay dollars. But I don't have the dollar patent. So I don't issue the dollar. I got to find the dollars. And if I can't earn them, then I need to get them from someone who has them. The IMF can arrange that loan, but it's going to come with very ugly strings attached, right? So, well, I think I'd look at that on a case-by-case basis, but some countries have done just that. Russia defaulted, not just on the dollar-denominated debt, but on some of its ruble debt, which was crazy. It could have paid all of that, right? What else? Anthony, basic income. So here's my thing. I am not categorically opposed to a basic income. I just don't know what people are really trying to do when they say basic income, because there are 1,001 varieties of this thing. Sometimes people say, and some of the people I know who are very wealthy say, we should just have a basic income and get rid of all other social programs. So Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, housing assistance, all that stuff goes away. And then we just send you a basic income, $30,000 a year. You figure out how to save for your retirement. You figure out how to get your health care. You figure out, right? And we'll send you a check, and then you work all that other stuff out. So our pay for is eviscerating this social safety net. I think that is extraordinarily reckless. I think that replacing programs that have constituencies, lobbying groups, people who are prepared to stand, to fight for, to defend those programs, swiping all of that away and replacing it with a promise of a check, free money, if you like, the next Congress that comes in, what's the first thing they're going to cut? The free money. the basic, it's going to be the first thing to go. It'll get whittled down until it's all gone. Meanwhile, you've compromised the safety net. Now, not everybody puts forward that. Some people say it's not a replacement for, it's a supplement to, and then I'm willing to talk about that. But yeah, I generally prefer the job guarantee because it aims the spending at the people who need it. It aims at the unemployed. I don't need a basic income check. And people who make more than I do certainly don't need a basic. And so one worry I have, is does everybody know what this basic income is? You get a check, and you get a check, and everybody gets a check. So $30,000. Well, if you're poor, you're going to eat right through your basic income. It's going to be gone. But if you're wealthy, you're going to take your $30,000 and you're going to buy Apple stock, or you're going to whatever. And so what it does to wealth inequality concerns me a great deal, because the poor are going to go right through it, consume the whole thing. The wealthy are going to invest, and then it's going to exacerbate already dangerous levels of inequality. So that's my concern.
I'd like to take up what this gentleman started with. There's a hierarchy of missions, and I think that you rather neatly hopped over saying these are going to be sorted out and approved. I think there's a great question of power and politics in this, and how are you going to jump over that?
You mean with respect to the job guarantee program?
No.
Oh.
Generally, in your model.
Okay.
Note it down. You got it. Thank you.
He didn't trust me. Josh, we can always talk anytime, but, oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
we
Stephanie.
talked at length.
I know, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And I'll ask you one question because I forgot to ask you this afternoon, which is if the constraint is real resource, what's to stop an economy land grabbing other countries' resources in order to expand the base at which it can spend money into?
What do you mean, land grabbing other?
I suppose in policy was once known as Lebensraum. You need to acquire other people's territory in order to have money to spend into it. If your constraint is real resources, because you want to spend money buying stuff you have.
Wait, what? Well, I'm missing the. Via what channel?
Well, only if your currency area is defined by your national territory, you can buy things in anything that is denominated in pound sterling.
Yeah.
Why not expand the territory in which you can buy stuff in pound sterling and therefore become a more powerful and more...
That's already an incentive. I mean, that's not Kelton. I don't think that follows from what I said. I think that countries with imperial ambitions are already exercising their imperial ambitions. And I don't think that it's carefully thought through in terms of the currency itself, right? I mean, I think it's more about the resources. The drive is to acquire territories rich in natural resources and strategic, geopolitical, strategic locations. So I don't think it follows from what I've argued, but.
So there's 3 minutes left, so you have
Yeah.
one more question, then you'll answer
Okay.
this question and that question.
Okay.
So Stephanie, first of all, apologies for coughing through your speech. This is questions from my 13-year-old daughter. She wants to know, because why can't somebody who's got a debt in a different currency just swap it for that swap their own currency for that one? She doesn't understand mechanics. I couldn't explain it to her because I don't really know. But I'm saying
Well, she
get
needs
it
to
from
learn
somewhere.
about
Somebody has to
options.
buy it. Yeah.
And swaptions. She could do that if she could engage in some derivatives markets and find somebody who wanted debt denominated in her currency. But, okay, let me circle back. Yes, okay, priorities, look, it's already the case. Nothing I said isn't already the case. So what I'm suggesting is that we're not making full use of the powers that we have, right? There is more that we could do to expand fiscal policy, if you like, whether it's tax cuts for those who would most benefit or spending increases. But it's always the case that there are competing alternatives. You're going to have a constituency in the House who, this group wants transportation because their state is really in trouble.
How are we going to solve it differently than how we do it now?
Look, the way that I would suggest thinking about this is suppose somebody runs on an agenda to do these 12 things, yeah? And wins the majority vote. Then you could say this person has, in effect, a mandate from the population. This is what the population has voted for. These are the things I want. Now it's up to the administration working through Congress to say, how much of this agenda can we get done, right? But the priorities come out of the budgeting process, and lots of voices get heard in that process, and they don't always, or even usually, reflect the will of the majority.
All right, that's macro, and that's your federal or the top government, but you have a local level which may not have these priorities at all.
I'm not, so you're saying the local can stand in the way of the...
Yes, I mean, people have attitudes now.
Sure.
And voter attitudes. And they're often at completely, they're often differ from what top politicians or even local politicians have. I mean, 68% of the British population, apparently, in polling, would not vote for Jeremy Corbyn, even though many of them don't like Theresa May. All right? So how does one adjust what's at the top and the hierarchy of the...
All you can do is pass legislation. We did it in the US with the ACA, with the American Health Care, so-called Obamacare, and that relied upon voluntary participation by the states. States had to expand Medicaid in order to fully participate in Obamacare. 21 states did not do that. And so you weren't able to roll out healthcare reform in nearly half of the country because the states stood in the way. So that can happen. In the federal job guarantee that we're talking about, we're imagining what happens if you have a deep red state and you don't have buy-in. People don't want to participate in the federal job guarantee, but you have population of people who desperately want work, but there are blockades being put in the way through state and local governments, and our solution is the federal government can directly employ those people. So you can end run. You can't always get away with that. But yeah, it's a legitimate question, and you can't resolve it in every case, but we're thinking about that with respect to the jobs. Yeah, terrific.
Let's do another round of...
Thank you, everybody.